Okay.
Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call to order the planning board meeting for December 16th, 2020. My name is Carrie Martinek. I'm the chair of the planning board. I just need to read a quick note before we get started tonight. This open meeting of the planning board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, the town of Northborough has been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings. And as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. All members of the planning board are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. This order allows the planning board to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda. Members of the public who wish to view the live stream of this meeting may do so by going to the Northborough Remote Meetings or YouTube via the link listed on the agenda, by tuning into cable access television government channels, Verizon Channel 30 or Charter Channel 192, or by visiting the town's website and going to the Department of Cable Access Television and click What's Playing Live. If you're on a phone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. I'd like to confirm that board members and persons anticipated on the agenda are remotely present and can be heard by stating the following. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Amy Paretsky?
Here.
Anthony Zaitin?
Here.
Millie Milton?
Here.
And Michelle Gillespie.
Here.
Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Brad Litchfield?
Here.
Robert Federico?
Here.
And Kathy Dubert.
Here.
Okay. Just for ground rules, actually, we don't have any hearings this evening, so I don't think I need to cover the ground rules for having speakers come in and out. So I think that does it. If technical, this may be relevant this evening with the pending snow. If technical difficulties arise, the chair will suspend the meeting while attempts to resolve are made. Any disconnections and reconnections of board members should be accurately reflected in the meeting minutes. Okay, great. With that, why don't we get started? Let's see. We have first on our agenda the consideration of minutes. So what I'd like to do is we have the October 20th, November 4th and 17th, and December 1st. And when we last met, we talked about what we thought for the format of our minutes. We had gone back and forth between longer, shorter, you know, where our task was to provide Melanie a good direction in terms of length. So just before we even go down the road of minutes, I just wanted to get a sense from board members, any feedback on that in terms of the last batch that we just received? Me?
Oh, well, I think for 11-4, 11-17, and 12-1, they were summarized. So I think, you know, it works. But just for me, I know with 10-20, it was a hearing. So sometimes with a hearing, there may be sentences that are my own that I'd like to add because I felt it was an important part that I said in the meeting. Nothing against Melanie or the minutes. It's just that I think with the public meetings where it's not a decision for an application that we've talked about all year, then I think the summary is fine. I just don't want her to get offended if say it's a meeting like with the Bartlett meeting or another really big application, if I want to add some sentences here and there. I mean, so I guess I'm in the middle. I like the summary, but then if it's a really big decision meeting, I'd like to be able to have the chance to add, you know, a couple sentences here and there that or even might even be a paragraph, but that I think are missing.
Okay. Any other thoughts on the minutes?
Sorry?
I think I agree with that.
Yep. Anthony, do you have something?
No, I think that's, I mean, I think depending on the meeting and, you know, whether it's a decision or public hearing and it's, you know, I think you can craft them differently depending on what the content of the meeting is, what I would suggest.
Yeah. Michelle, did you have any thoughts on the minutes for direction? Oh, Michelle, there you go.
No, I'm fine.
Okay, great. Sorry, were you trying to add something?
No, I prefer the summarization, but if somebody wants to make a point, that is a statement on their own behalf, I think that's okay.
Yeah. I too, for the November and December, I actually really appreciated the shorter versions. It is a lot to read. And I thought that it was just the right amount for those last three. I don't think we had any hearings going on. So it's just the right amount, and the summaries were good. I think it captured the essence of what we were talking about and had both sides going back and forth. I thought they were great. And I would agree that for when we have a hearing, and especially when we're deliberating, I do like the more detailed version, just because I know I like to go back and reference them quite a bit, several times when it's a big one like that. So if it's not too confusing, Melanie, maybe in the instance where we have a hearing, specifically when we're deliberating, maybe a little more detail, but otherwise it sounds like the board unanimously liked the summaries from November and December. Staff, did you have any comments on that? I know you're also.
Yep, no, that works, Gary. I mean, I think that's informative and easy to follow. So we'll just, when there's public hearings, we'll include more detail and like you said, especially when there's, when the deliberation is happening.
So with that said, I did have a lot of edits for the October meeting minutes. So what I wanted to do, because they're actually in the line with the agenda item for Zero Bartlett, I wanted to hold on the 10-20 minutes and just at least get through November and December, if everybody's prepared to get through those tonight, and then swing back around to October, if that's okay. Did everybody have a chance to look at the minutes from 11/4?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were there any amendments for the minutes from November 4th?
I actually did not have any.
No.
No, I didn't either. Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the November 4th minutes as presented or as submitted? I'm sorry.
I make a motion to approve the November 4th minutes as submitted.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Moved and seconded. I will take a roll call vote to approve the minutes from November 4th. Millie?
Aye.
Anthony?
Aye.
Amy?
Aye.
Michelle?
Aye.
And Terry's an aye. The minutes from November 4th have passed. Did everyone have a chance to read the minutes from 11/17, November 17th?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Were there any edits to the minutes?
Not for me.
I had two very small ones, just really small.
Sure. Do you want to cover them?
Just more for context. Yeah, I just have to open them. Let's see, because I wrote it down on a piece of paper. Sorry. I just have to. Okay, here it is. All right, November 17th. It was on page 2. And it was when we were talking about the zoning bylaw amendments, and it was under my discussion about zoning bylaw amendments. And it's really just one word. The third line down where it says why at the very end says Ms. Joubert said it was part of the 2009 rewrite, not a carryover, and explain the reason why it was purposely put there. And it wasn't really the reason why, she explained that it was purposely put there, because I did go back and try to listen to the reason why. And so it's just that one word that it was out of context a little.
So you're saying remove the word why?
Yeah. Because the explanation was about that it was purposely put there. And then, she asked Michelle if she remembered that it was purposely put there, but it wasn't really why it was put there, just that it was put there.
Okay. Did you have another one?
Yeah, my other one is down when it talks about Ace Hardware. And this again is just because it's out of context a little. It says Mr. Federico said Ace Hardware is permitted to store and show items outside. And he wrote, he said by variance or special permit. It wasn't because it was a contractor's yard. So I just wanted to add the by variance or special permit, or else when you read it, it makes it seem like Ace Hardware is a contractor's yard, which he was explaining when Michelle asked if Ace Hardware was a contractor's yard. He said he remembered outside storage was by special permit or variance. And I went back and listened to it just to double check.
Okay, Bob, does that sound right to you? Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Okay,
Those are my only two changes.
okay. Any other members have suggested amendments?
Not for me. It was good.
Okay, would anyone like to make a motion to accept the November 17th minutes as amended?
I make a motion to accept the November 17th minutes as amended.
Okay, is there a second?
Second,
Okay, motion is made and seconded. All in favor, Millie,
Aye.
Anthony,
Aye.
Amy,
aye.
Michelle,
Aye.
and carries an aye. So we have the November 17th minutes pass. Next, we have December 1st. Did everyone have a chance to read December 1st?
Yes.
Okay, any edits for December 1st?
Not for me.
Not for me.
I just had a quick one too, sorry. I'm not changing a lot. It just changes the context of the sentence.
Okay, what do you have?
Down December 1st, and I scroll, so I don't even know what page it's on. But it's when I'm talking about contractor's yard again. It would probably be down the second or third page. It doesn't tell me what page, because the first couple I had printed out. This one isn't printed out. So there's a paragraph that says she wanted to update the definition of a contractor's yard.
Mhm.
And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It says Ms. Paretsky said it could be added. And then I just want to add to that sentence, we could talk about it as a board. They aren't even in the definition now. Because my point wasn't that I wanted to take them out. I just wanted to talk about it. And I felt the paragraph was out of context, making it sound like my purpose was to take them out of the definition. But I went back and listened, and it said that Ms. Paretsky said it could be added. We could talk about it as a board. They aren't even in the definition now.
Okay, so what you're proposing, the addition of that sentence?
Yeah, it's after the added. So I'm adding, we could talk about it as a board. They aren't even in the definition now. So that's what I was adding.
Okay.
Carrie, or Amy, I don't know where you are.
I don't do either.
Okay. I know, because, I could share my screen. Let me see if I can open those minutes.
Well, can you just say maybe like what the beginning of the paragraph says?
Yes. It's the one about, the beginning of the paragraph said she wanted to update the definition of a contractor's yard.
Okay, so that's in the middle of page 4, if anyone else is looking.
Okay.
And then what did you want to change?
3, 4, 5, 6. I'm down like 6 lines, at least on mine. See, I tried to cut and paste. But down on 6 lines, it said Ms. Paretsky said it could be added.
Okay, yeah.
And then after that, I have a comma. We could talk about it as a board, comma. They aren't even in the definition now, period. Just to put it in context of what we're talking about.
So we could talk, and maybe Melanie's already got this, but I just want to have this as backup because I don't go back and listen to the tapes. We could talk about it as a board.
Comma.
Yeah.
They aren't even in the definition now.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, thanks.
Anything else from anyone? Okay, so is there a motion to accept the minutes as amended for December 1st?
I make a motion to accept the December 1st minutes as amended.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, Millie,
Aye.
Anthony,
Aye.
Amy,
Aye.
Michelle,
Aye.
and Carrie's an aye. Okay, so why don't we move down to the review of 0 Bartlett Street special permit and site plan decision. For that, I think everybody received an edited version, and I know it was a lot to read. So what I wanted to do, just to start, was at least talk a little bit about why I put in some of the changes that I made, and then figure out, you know, how we want to go forward with editing, what we want to edit, you know, just take it from there. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pull up, and Amy, I know you had edits as well. I don't want to speak to yours. I'll let you speak to your own edits. I'm just going to walk through why I changed what I changed.
Sure.
Let me pull that up. Okay, give me a second here. I have a lot of files going on. Okay, whoops. Okay, I think this is it. Okay, does everybody see the file name that has December 15th at the top here?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so my edits are in a few different, primarily in a few different areas. The first part is, I think, pretty self-explanatory. I just happen to keep folders of all the different emails and letters, and I added the ones that weren't already here. So I just went back and literally pulled whatever I noticed was in one place but not the other. So that's why that looks like a lot right there. So basically I followed the same format, whether it was a letter or an email, the date, who it's from, and what was the subject line. Unless it had an attachment, I included that as well. In some cases, there were people submitted materials that they either talked through or put an explanation with. So I added them as materials and just described them as they were described by the person who sent them, just to give a little bit of context of what was being submitted here. And also I noticed there was actually one email that was in support of the application. So I just added that section here with that email using the same format. Then the other part of primary editing, let's see, in the hearing section, well, actually, I'll come back to the hearings because I want to go down to my primary areas. Then what I did was I'm going to share something else for a second. Let's see. So I went back to one of the classes on writing defensible decisions. I think, as we talked about last time, this is something that is a decision that's likely to be appealed. So I'd taken this class before, but I just wanted to refresh my memory a little bit. So I took it again and then just went through the materials. And there were a couple of sections that I noticed that I shared in my link to Kathy, but I just wanted to point out to the board here so you had some context of why I added so much. One spot that they recommended is just really going through the applicable law and decision criteria to include that in your decision. So that lent to that giant section on applicable law and decision criteria. And then there was also, in addition to, so I guess just to go back here, under the findings of fact, we listed all our general findings, and then we had a couple of specific findings. But what really stood out to me in this particular class and documentation is the inclusion of specific findings. And the piece that really stood out was just showing how we came to our conclusions, really about the board, not about applicants or anyone who testified at the public hearing or residents or any consultants, anyone, just the board, seeing how thought process worked. And I wanted to make sure that was represented, especially in a decision that it could stand to be appealed. I tried to make it clear, why we came to the decision we did. So with that, I'm going to go back to the decision. Does anyone have any questions or thoughts on this? I just wanted to provide it as a background. Let's see. I'm going to go back to the decision. Okay, so then going back to where we were before, that's what you're seeing here. The applicable law and decision criteria is added in here. And then in addition to the general findings, which are still listed up top above here, I have specific findings. So this was really going back, listening to our deliberation, really pulling together how did our thought process, I looked at it through the lens of how did our thought process work? What were the things we were talking about that stood out to us? What led us to these decisions? So that was the lens that I used in making the edits here. And then obviously, because I had to go back and listen to the hearings in order, well, this part, the specific findings is all from the 20th through deliberation.
Okay.
But then I went back, and went through the minutes and the hearings themselves. And I just wanted to make sure that some of the key pieces that we did that were a part of our thought process were just reflected throughout a couple of the hearings. So in some cases, there was a lot about what the applicant had presented, but didn't really cover what kind of questions we were asking. So again, I just wanted to sort of show the thought process, watching us go through this to just, make it clear that we really thought about it and put real consideration into some serious questions. The one thing that I did catch was there was something here about Mr. Lopez going through all the permits, and when I watched this hearing, he didn't go through all the permits, so I didn't know if that was just we wanted to reflect them in the decision. So I just put a note that we do have them reflected in the decision in other spots. I don't know if this was mistakenly put in this hearing, but it was Dave Robinson who brought up the memos, but didn't really go into any depth with the memos. So that was just one I highlighted as kind of a question. Like, for example, the fire chief memo came August 26th, and this was the July 21st hearing. So it was either in the wrong place or something happened with that. So I just highlighted it. I don't know if there are any initial thoughts or comments, or if Amy, you want to talk to some of your edits. Any initial thoughts or comments?
I thought it was really good because
Yeah.
I was going through it too. And I actually was using Dave Dineski's Word document, and I was writing comments on things that I had found. But then when yours came out, I took yours and just added, I took it out of the Dave memo and added to yours because it made it less confusing for me. Because after reading yours, like I noticed that the special permit criteria was missing for the groundwater, and I was trying to write it. But after reading yours, I'm like, oh, that sounds way better than what I was trying to phrase. So I just went with yours. So I just took out, that's what I did, is I had made edits too. So I just took mine and added it to your decision.
Did you want to talk about your edits specifically? Do you want to I mean, so I guess we can do this a couple different ways. I realize this is a lot, and I don't want board members to feel if the board would like to, take time to read through this now, having that context and look through it and think about it, and the other reason I wanted to hold those minutes and speak to them is because I made a few similar edits to the October 20th minutes. I wanted our deliberation to be reflected in the October 20th minutes. Like we were talking about before when we were speaking about the length of the minutes, because I don't know to what extent minutes would be referenced, but I didn't want it to be boiled down to a paragraph when we have so much on the line. So likewise, I have a lot of edits on the minutes. So I wasn't sure if board members want time to take and digest them both, or, I don't think it's a good use of time to go paragraph by paragraph because there's so much. So I'd like to hear from the board, what makes sense to everybody that you want to do.
So I read through the version that combined yours and Amy's and Kathy's all together. And for the most, I liked it. I think it was well done. And I honestly didn't see anywhere where I would make any changes. I know there was one spot, I think on page 13, where Amy had written a paragraph and said, well, maybe, it was something so close to what Carrie had written, so decide which language you want to choose. And then I found just like a couple very minor, maybe typos, but I'm fine with it unless anybody, I imagine not everybody got through it. So I'm good with the way it is.
Amy, do you want to talk about some of your edits? We didn't really get to look at them. I don't
Or do you
want
want me to pull it out?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, let's see. To find it. Okay, do you see that, or is it small, or is it taking up the whole screen?
Oops, there you go.
Oops. Do you see it?
Yeah.
Okay,
But it's kind of weird. There you go.
can you see it now?
Mhm.
It's weird because I don't know what you're seeing. My question, I have a couple for Kathy. At the very top, there's the decision. And then on the first sentence, I was assuming, should we add all 3 special permits there, like the planning board, and then add the groundwater special permit, and then the special permit to extend onto groundwater 1, and then the special permit site plan approval? I was just assuming that we have to, is that like the title?
Is that for me?
Yeah.
If you looked at every other decision that, whether it's the planning board or the ZBA, they're all written where it just is special permit with site plan approval, because that's what the decision is. And then when you go into the decision, it starts to explain what special permits are being granted, site plan being granted. So in your heading, and I noticed this someplace else in your edits, Amy, they did not, nor did you, I don't think you voted on it, but they withdrew the part about moving into groundwater area 1. So that's not part of your decision.
We definitely voted on it. I don't think they ever officially withdrew it. They just said if we accepted the new driveway configuration, that we wouldn't need it. But this fire chief hadn't even approved it yet. So we definitely didn't vote to withdraw it. And we voted on all 3 permits. So I wanted to include them all because that's the way the vote went down.
Yeah.
And I changed the title only because I did go back to the Bartlett Street ones, and some of them said special permit with earthworks permit, and some of them mentioned groundwater. They were all different, but I just thought it wouldn't hurt to have all 3 there because that's what we voted on. And my second line for parcel 3 there, it's a very minor detail and it probably doesn't even matter. But in some letters and some maps, it says parcel 3A, and others it said parcel 3. So I didn't know if that's even a big deal, if like Dave Dineski had to check it out and see which one is it really, or maybe it's both and it changed over the years.
No, it's parcel 3. That's how it appears in our assessor's records.
Okay. Some of our paperwork said 3A.
No, it absolutely does. But
Yeah.
the assessor's records
Yeah.
are parcel 3.
Okay. So some of mine were just little things. So then I changed, it said commercial and industrial, so I just changed it to industrial. And then
But-
I added the groundwater 1 special permit.
That particular section, Amy, that you changed, that's how the bylaw reads. So that's why it's written that way.
I checked. There, the D3C4. There was one of them that is for commercial and industrial, and the other one is for industrial on 60,000 square feet. And I think I can open it right now. 7 dash 07 010 D D3 C4 C4 says industrial developments on lots of at least 60,000 square feet, but C3 says the commercial development. So the 4 was industrial. So that was the only reason why I changed that.
Yeah, that was a town council edit. So, I mean, if you want to do something different than what town council advised, that's completely up to you as a board.
Okay, and then I changed right here where it talked about the, and I guess Carrie had seen it too. It said it went from January till June, and I just updated it where it went from January, continued to February, continued to March, and then it went to June. So that's just, a lot of mine are just little details. And maybe people can go through them.
Could you just go back up for a second?
Oh, sure. I did not go through all the letters.
No, that's okay. Wait, stop right there. All right, so we opened the hearing on January 21st. We continued it, but we opened it at least.
Did
Oh,
we?
no, I don't. Okay,
I don't think we opened it till June 9th. I don't know. I can go back and look.
I think we
You opened it in January,
yeah,
Okay.
I think we opened it in January, continued to February.
right?
Okay.
And then COVID hit. And then
Mhm.
just as a precaution, it wasn't required by the governor's emergency action, but just as a precautionary, I re-advertised all hearings for both boards
Yeah.
to start at the next time that you would be meeting. So that's why there's the interruption there.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want me to change the sentence to say we opened the meeting January 21st? Or,
Yeah, because it sounds like you're saying.
or we can just talk about it next time if people want to read it over and then come back with comments.
Okay.
And then I did not go through all the letters. I was
Can I
so,
just ask a question for a minute? Because there's so much here.
yep.
And I don't know who did what, because the colors, I mean, it's like, oh my God.
Oh, I'm red. And on my computer, Carrie's are green.
So when I printed it out, I'm looking at page 8, where it just talks about Mr. Lopez reviewed the process to the date, which included, you took that out and then you put this whole paragraph in highlighted in red. Is that yours or Carrie's or who is that?
What
That
hearing?
was me. That was what I was saying before, where at that particular hearing, well, I don't even remember where I'm ever going through that, but he did not go through that. And then it was weird because there was a fire chief letter from August that said he went through in July. So that didn't make sense. So I just said, if we needed to reflect it somewhere, we can make sure it's in there are places where it's listed in the findings and somewhere else, I think, submitted documents, exhibits. So that was fine if we want to represent it. I just thought it was in the wrong spot hearing wise or the wrong description.
Okay, so I guess when we have situations like this, that there are significant amounts taken out, we should probably go back to Kathy and ask Kathy where she would suggest to put it in. Or
Yes.
I'm just trying to figure out how you want us to comment on all these changes. Do I,
Well, what I did was, I went back and I listened to the hearing.
So yeah, so that's not Amy's change, Michelle. That was mine. And I do want to make sure that we figure out where those things go, but I removed it from there because it didn't happen there. So it's a good point.
Aren't those all listed under exhibits?
I thought they were.
Yeah, they're all here. Let me go down further. I think they are listed somewhere else. They're either finding of facts or exhibits. I probably already passed exhibits.
so I guess I can see here how Amy's is here and how Kerry's is here. And then I don't think Anthony gave feedback, just agreed with you guys. I guess what my question is what are you expecting staff to do to take these changes and then make the alterations and then get back to us at the next meeting?
Well, personally, I'm looking for feedback in terms of what we want to do for the next step. You know, do we feel like this is on the right track? Do we want to take it back and read through it? Because it is a lot, for sure. It's a lot to get through. Other edits that Millie, we haven't heard from you. If you have anything, Anthony, I don't know if you have anything additional, or Michelle, if you have something additional. So maybe if we just put out on the table what we had changed. I don't, and if board members want to read through it again and take some time, that's okay too.
Harry, if I can just answer, actually, I forgot who asked the question, but if you're looking on page 8 and 9, actually 8, 9, and 10, at least how it printed out for me, but that list that came from Gutierrez, that was in response to a question that the planning board asked as far as what other permits were needed for the project or something to that effect. The applicant stated that this was the last stop in their permitting process, something to that effect. And then someone asked the applicant to put together a list of all the permits they've received. So that's where that list came from. And there's an actual document in the file. And most of those individual things listed are not in the exhibits because we don't have them. They weren't part of their application process. But it's in a memo that Gutierrez provided to the board. So they couldn't be listed as exhibits because I don't physically have them.
Okay, so do we just need to find a home for them? So I think what actually happened at the hearing was Dave Robinson said, the board requested a lighting memo and a summary of permits, and we've submitted that. But there was no here's this one and here's that one. And this list actually had 4 more bullets that were listed than were on the memo itself. So I don't know if that's what confused me about it here, because that's not how it happened. And there were 4 extra ones on this list than were on the memo. So I just wanted to figure out where their home is. Maybe if it's not exhibits, I thought they were covered elsewhere, but we can double check that too. Because obviously,
I can go through the minutes and my notes on when they were, or at least what meeting it was presented at, and when it was referenced, and just if it doesn't belong where I had originally put it, I'll find a spot for it.
Well, it must have been, so that's a good point. It must have been at least later than August 26th, because that's listed that's on that list. So it had to have been after August 26th. So that'll narrow it down.
Mm-hmm. And if we didn't get the letters, like say they're conservation and you're saying we don't even have the letters in our files. I mean, if there's something we don't even have, should it be part of our decision?
Well, you asked for it and they gave it to you.
The list or the memos?
The list.
Oh, okay, so then you could list that we got a memo with the list.
You requested a summary from the applicant and they provided you a summary. And you did discuss some of these. You talked about the 8M permit, you talked about Conservation Commission. I can't remember, you talked about fire chief letters, obviously. Some of the residents referred to some of these, some of this information. So, I mean, I don't think it harms you in any way. It's just a summary that you requested of, what other boards and departments they had been to.
Does it have to be, if we requested a memo, like right here in this sentence, it says they submitted the memo and we requested the memo and you said it doesn't hurt or help. I mean, just because the decision's so long as it is, do you have to list them all out?
That you all can make that decision.
Okay.
That's,
All right.
I mean,
Well,
these all pertain to the project. I don't understand the issue with it, but that's up to
If
you.
we didn't get a copy of it, it doesn't. But we can go back and look because I think a lot of those were in other places.
Okay, so that's a question. We had a question on the commercial industrial. Did you want to go through anything else on yours? Or
Mine is just basic because I just went down and added a couple of things to yours. And for anyone who's reading them, mine were in red.
Well, it depends. It might depend on their side. I don't know if it's consistently, like on mine is blue and red versus.
Right, that's how, if you, using the printers in-house, that's how it comes out, is Carrie's is in red. And then there's some that Carrie highlighted, so it's red and yellow, and then Amy's is in blue.
So
It might be Carrie in blue. Do you think?
No, it's you in blue.
It
That's
depends
so
on
weird.
your side. It matters, your preferences are the ones that are applied. So color is irrelevant,
Oh, okay.
but that's okay.
I guess right here I had a question too. I'm on the September 15th. And it said the hearing was continued to September 15th. When I was going through the minutes and through the meetings, I was listening to the hearings. The hearing was actually continued to September 1st, but it was the election. So then we continued it again to the 15th. Does that matter in the decision, Kathy? Or can you just leave it as it went to the 15th?
It's fine the way that it's written, to the 15th. You didn't have a meeting on the 1st.
Yeah. I just didn't know because when I was following along, I was going minute by minute and it said the hearing was continued to the 1st. So then I went to the 1st and said, oh, we didn't have one, and it got continued to the 15th. But if we don't need, I didn't know how specific it had to be. If that doesn't matter, then we can take that out. And then, yeah, I guess if people go back and read it, like because it was so, it was tricky for me. So I just wrote what I had on my memo, but Carrie has some stuff above. So maybe I even want to read both of them and see if there's, maybe just add like a couple words of mine into Carrie's, or if somebody else has something to add. But I know in this paragraph here, I think it's not that I want to add this whole paragraph. It's just that was my paragraph and I just threw it on. So we all had everything in one place. And then I thought maybe we'd talk about, I think people would need time to read what we wrote. So just to explain it, if there are a couple places where it seems duplicate, it's just because I didn't want to work it into Carrie's sentences. So I just kind of plot mine in. Sorry. And then I added a couple of general findings. And then everybody can read those if they want. And then this, I'm not adding this paragraph about Cedar Hill, but I was just questioning it because I know when we did Cedar Hill, I asked Kathy if we should add conservation information or groundwater? And she said no, because the conservation has their own decision. So that was something I just flagged because I want to ask, because we did have a lot of conservation stuff on here. And I know we did talk about environmental things. So I didn't know if we should leave them on or we take them off just to be consistent with our other decisions where we didn't add in all the conservation stuff, or even the Conservation Commission unanimously voted to approve it. They have their own decision. We have our own decision. So does it matter if it's there or not? That was my question there, because I remember we talked about it just recently about how we have two separate decisions. And I'm sure conservation talked probably about our lighting and stuff, but they probably didn't include that in their decision. So I didn't know if it just made it more tricky by combining the conservation stuff in with the planning board stuff. So that was my question for the other board members and Kathy, that maybe we want to think about that. And then, yeah.
So what is, oh, go ahead.
I just had a question on page 8. So now that I understand the color coordination here, Amy, if Amy's in blue, which to me printed out like a light blue, so I'm assuming this is yours, Amy. And I'm trying to figure out all your edits so that when I give feedback, I know.
Oh, sure.
And this is only pertaining to design review because I was on that committee.
Yep.
That Kathy Juber, town planner, reviewed the design committee process and reported the committee recommends approval of the proposal as all comments and suggestions made during the design review committee process. Did you cross that out, or was that Carrie who crossed it out? Just curious.
That was me, only because I was listening to the meeting, and Kathy said during the hearing that date that she didn't have a letter from design review, but that the design review answered all comments and suggestions and had been addressed by the applicant. Like, if you listen to the hearing for this date, which is June 9th, when you go down to what Kathy said about design review, she said that all comments and suggestions made during the design review process have been addressed by the applicant and incorporated into the site plans. Like, during the June 9th hearing, she didn't say the committee recommends approval of the proposal. Like, I actually, for all these sections, I went back and re-listened to the hearings.
You understand, like, in the process, like before an applicant comes before you, they pass through their meetings in design review, and then they move on to the next board who's permitting them. And in this case, it was a planning board. So we had already approved the proposals they put towards us. So I just want to make a note that in order for them to have left our committee to go on to planning board, they would have approved the proposal that was put forward to us.
Yeah, and I think it is further down. It's a design, in one of the exhibits, it said January 15th, design review committee voted to recommend approval.
Okay.
But in this June 9th meeting, she didn't say that. So, I mean, I assume that you did, but that it was approved, but I don't know. I just thought we had to write what was said during the meeting.
So maybe since it was approved back in January, at the beginning of the year, she was implying that in June meeting. I don't know. I just didn't understand why you took that out. And then another thing I wanted just to go over again with regards to design review. I think there was somewhere in here where you said that the snow was in front of the truck bays, but always to leave design review, they always have a snow removal plan. So I don't remember that the snow was in front of the truck bays. If I read that correctly.
It definitely was, because it was a question I asked on October 20th.
It wasn't the plan that you got, Michelle. It was the revised plan that came after it left design review. We got one plan that you guys said looked good, and then we got a revised plan that I don't know if you later in October after design review never saw it.
You're talking about they revised something that we had,
yes.
Had submitted a snow removal and then changed it afterwards.
Correct.
All right. I'm just trying to understand where these comments are coming from.
Sure.
I know they would have had to pass that at design review. So you're saying it's changed and, okay.
It was at the very last meeting. We asked a lot about snow removal. And they added snow removal areas on the landscaped areas and in front of the doors. And I had asked that question that night, like you're blocking the bay doors. So.
No, I just wanted to understand.
Yep.
Okay, so I think we need direction on, Amy, if you go back to you had a screenshot that you said not for inclusion, but
Oh, yeah.
Yep. So what is the correct? Oops.
Yeah, I gotta go down a little more. Oh, no, too far. Sorry. There we go. Everybody's dizzy now.
So so Kathy, you had noted one thing, but we included it differently here. Is this the correct thing to do here? What should we do? Because now we have somewhere to the point before about the memo. So prior to the deletion, it was listed in here, but now it's not. So if we want to reflect it somewhere, it's now.
I'm sorry, Carrie, I need to catch up. We're in the decision part.
Oh, yeah.
Fact finding.
Oh, you're in fact findings, not decision?
No, this is just a general finding right here.
So which one is it that you're talking about? And Carrie, are you going to vote on each one of these changes, or?
I don't know. We have to think of, it's a lot to look at. So I think we need to really, my first hope was to get everything on the table and then figure out some of it, I think we can go by sections.
Okay, so right now the question of me is in the fact findings, and which one?
I guess my question, and maybe it's just for the board and Kathy too, but I've been reading all the minutes lately to catch up. And when I read decision of 400 Cedar Hill, I had asked Kathy that night, should we say that, should we add in a fact that the Conservation Commission and the Groundwater Advisory Committee approved the plan? And you said, no, the Conservation Commission is a separate board that acts under a different state statute and issues their own decision under the deadlines. And groundwater is part of the special permit. So for Cedar Hill, I questioned adding in the conservation stuff and you said no. But
I think on Cedar Hill, it was someone, I don't remember whether it was you, Amy, or not. Someone asked about including the Conservation Commission's order of conditions to the decision. And I think that's what I responded to, was saying that, they have their own, decision that gets recorded in their own appeal period, so that it wasn't necessary to include the Conservation Commission's decision.
Mhm.
But if that's what everyone is, concerned about here, this number, actually, I don't know what number it is now, but where it says the Conservation Commission unanimously voted on June 29th, 2020 to approve an order of conditions for the project.
yeah.
If that's causing people,
Well, I was
heartburn, you could take that out.
Heartburn. I was just trying to stay consistent. Like when I went back and looked at this decision, I did read the Cedar Hill decision and I read all the other Bartlett Street decisions. And I was trying to compare just to see, because this did. And then I didn't know if we left out all three, like the MIPA. And because we didn't talk about the MIPA. And so those were different things that were listed under the Conservation Commission's decision, not ours. So I just didn't know if they should come out because we didn't include them before. But it's something
I think the reason why they are included here is, again, you asked the applicant for a summary of the permits that they had received to date. And so that was a matter of your record, or it is a matter of your record.
Mhm.
And so I think that that's why it's reflected here is you had asked for the information and it's in the file. That's all.
Mhm.
So maybe the ones that were deleted up there are probably listed in the findings of fact. Although I know I never got a copy of the meatback because I asked for it, but it was listed in the memo.
Aren't we in the findings of facts? I'm confused.
Oh
We're
yeah,
in the,
no.
we're in the
but-
findings of facts, and isn't it 12, 13, 14, 15 that we're talking about?
Mhm.
Yes, but up
Okay.
above, when we were talking about, there was a whole section that was deleted by Kerry, and we said, where would that go? So I think that's where it's listed down here.
Yeah, so that's where, so right, so then it would kind of, we'll have to think about that one because I don't think they can be deleted in both spots. I think it needs to be reflected somewhere. So we'll just have to,
Carrie, can I just remind everybody, I mean, you know, again, this is your process, but as you're going through this, you know, you have 90 days within which the decision needs to be filed. And, you know, we're into the January, you know, is the end of the 90 days, January 18th. So it
Okay.
needs to be, you know, filed by January 18th. So just for people to keep that in mind of,
Mhm.
you know, you've got a meeting on the 5th and you've got a meeting on the 19th. So,
It's a lot.
you
Money
know,
a lot
if
here, maybe we decide on the 5th if people want to read it all.
well, what if we do this? What if, is there anything else you want to explain that needs explaining, that isn't
No.
clear, that isn't evident by way of what it is?
No.
Or does anybody here have questions now that isn't clear to you what it means? Like Michelle, you had a couple questions you asked, or if anybody else says, well, first of all, Millie, do you have anything that you wanted to add?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this is actually a lot more detailed than I might have been aware that the decision would require. So I haven't really, this is the first big decision I've looked through. And to be honest with you, I'm a little overwhelmed with it. So
Okay.
I'd be hesitant to really
That's okay.
insert anything.
That's all right. Anthony, do you have anything to add?
No, you know, where we started, you know, I read through the whole thing and the way it was, with the exception of a few areas where there was duplicate from you and Amy, and then, like I said, maybe two very minor typos, if I understood it correctly. I think it looks good, and I think that the level of detail is important, just to make sure that all the information that was, you know, presented and deliberated is made into record.
Yeah.
And then Michelle, do you have any other thought, anything that you wanted to add?
No, I guess it's since staff wrote the decision. I mean, does Kathy have any feedback if you had time to go through this, or did you just get this, Kathy?
no, I've gone through both Carrie's and Amy's edits.
Okay, do you have any feedback?
Well, I think most importantly is we need to look at this time frame, and you know, I originally, you know, drafted the decision, provided it to town council, and you know, town council made their edits, and which were very few. I sent that to everybody what their edits were. Most of it was, you know, grammatical, just to make things flow a little bit easier in legalese speak. And so I would assume that the board would want town council to review this again. So you need to, you know, factor that in, that town council needs to review this once you decide on what your edits are going to be. And then again, you know, it needs to all be filed. I certainly do not want, well, my comfort zone is I would not want to be going down to January 18th to file this.
No, and actually the 16th is a Saturday. Wait, did you say 6? No, you said 18th. I'm sorry.
18th.
Okay. So
So, and it's October 20th is when you made the decision. The way we always calculate is we start the day after, but if you know, just to be absolutely on, to allow no error here, it could we could be looking at January 17th as the drop dead as to when this needs to be filed. And that is a Sunday. So then we would have to be looking at the 15th, which is a Friday.
Okay. So.
And that's just a difference of a day, but because there's a weekend in there.
Yep. Okay, so I guess it depends on how comfortable the board feels. Do you want to, we can spend the time to go through it now, or if you want to take it little by little, or if you want to take it back with you, we'd be under a little tighter, but in that case, let's see, we'd have to be back on the 5th. We'd have to basically be at the table ready to say, here's the parts we like, here's what we don't like, this thing is passed, and ready to go off. And as soon as council says it's fine, we'd have to be able to be ready to sign.
Yeah, Carrie, if I can, I just realized January 18th is Martin Luther King Day. So that's a holiday that town hall would be closed, so it couldn't be filed that day. So again, I think, that we need to be looking at January 15th. And the statement that you just made about, having town council review it, if you're looking at talking about this more on the 5th, and then you would make your final edits on the 5th.
Yeah, we'd have, actually, after tonight, he'd have to, well, no, because it won't be ready for him to look at. Yeah, we'd have to be finalizing on the 5th. We have no choice.
And then, you need to factor in, well, again, I would suggest you need to factor in, if he comes back and suggests, this can be added, this shouldn't be added, or, whatever advice he offers you, do you want to discuss that before you come in to sign the decision?
Kathy, can I make a suggestion? Since there are so many significant changes or additions, could we do legal counsel in like a two-phased approach? Like, for example, take what has been given to us now, have legal counsel look at it, and then give feedback to the board so that then we can discuss it on the 5th?
Sure. So we could present it to him that these are the changes that the planning board wants to make.
Well, this is like a significant amount of changes. Like there's a lot of them, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it basically doubles the size of the decision that I wrote.
Rather than going line item by line item, isn't it better for him to just take, these 50 or 60 changes, look at them over and say, I've reviewed it and here's what I would agree with and not agree with. And that gives the board in the 5th sort of like a baseline to go by to wrap it up.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how the board feels about it, but at least he can look at all of these changes and say, well, give you feedback on it, right? Because there's so many of them, right? Mm-hmm. And then based on that, then you can go back and either disagree or agree with them and then make a final decision on the 5th so that you have enough time to meet the deadline.
Okay, so I'm just thinking that timeline in my head to make sure that works. So then at the 5th, when we come back and finalize it, it's not going back anywhere else. That's the day we are saying, yes, this is ready to sign.
I'm thinking we should meet again. Like, instead of meeting on the 5th and then whatever second date we picked, we should meet like the 5th and the 10th or the 5th and the 12th. Like, just so we make the date. Like, I think we need 2 meetings before the decision goes out. So if we meet on the 5th and say, okay, this is what town council said, then we have to go through it all. Or we meet on December 30th. I'm sure people don't want to do that.
Well, so it sounds like Millie still wants to go back through it. I don't know if Michelle needs to go back through it. Is there any reason that we can't do in a similar manner to what, Carrie and Amy did, is if there's changes, have the changes published and have Kathy put those out to the board, or maybe right after town council has the opportunity to review it, get that out, then we can review it. If there's additional changes, people can send those back and filter back through Kathy, and then we'd be more prepared at least on the 5th. And maybe it's not the 5th, but we're going to cover. We can cover a lot of ground between now and then, and be more prepared to say, what do you think of these changes or these, edits by town council? Just what I'm saying is we can kind of keep the ball rolling without having, a quorum, and not that we're discussing it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is there anything that we can solve, we can fix here that we know we need to fix so that we're not, like, for example, I think we need to solve the memo thing, figuring out, but I don't think we can remove them in both spots. If they're on the memo, they've been submitted to us, or I guess they're on public record. So somehow they need to be reflected. And then was there anything else?
Well, I pulled this page up because this is where I put my paragraph in, but it probably is pretty similar to your paragraphs. So I didn't really have time to, I guess I should read both. And do we want to merge it, or I can just leave it? Your paragraphs might cover what I was saying too. I'm just trying to figure right now, and then I can just take mine out.
I thought it was covered in other areas, but you wrote it down, so you'd have to see if you think that as well.
Right. So I hate to take people's time. I can't concentrate when I have people waiting.
Carrie, can you hear me?
Oh yeah, I couldn't hear you till now. Yes.
Okay, because I'm having technical difficulty, but you can hear me, right?
Yes, but it doesn't. Michelle, is that you? Oh, you're frozen. That's why.
I'm frozen. Yeah. I'm a precursor for tomorrow's weather.
Frozen.
But at least, okay, I just want to make sure you heard me. Yeah. I'm just in favor of letting legal counsel, like we've done a first draft and
Okay.
gone through, and there's a lot of changes and everyone's like, okay, and had questions. My only feedback is I'm in favor of, let's have town council look at it and get back to us at our next meeting and then have another discussion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
at the
so
same
I just
time-
want to verify then, Carrie, which version is going to town council? Is it your edits or Amy's edits? Because some of your edits are not that they're in opposition to each other, but they're
conflicting. There is one.
Yeah.
I know what you mean.
There is one conflicting. I didn't
Well,
know.
yeah, because I'm saying that didn't happen at the hearing and it's represented in other places, but then you're taking it out in the other places that I'm relying on. So we just need to, if we need to represent that because they're part of public record, it needs a home. So, did we lose Michelle?
I think personally, I think the home it makes sense in the findings of facts. That it's put there. I can make, if you want, I can make a reference to, or correct my reference to whatever meeting that memo was, supplied to you. And so simply the what's up now on everyone's screen, take it out of there, but just make just put a statement in there that the memo was supplied or something to you.
Oh, yeah. So I did add that. So
And-
Mr. Robinson updated the board that they submitted
Yeah.
a memo and the memo that outlined all the permits. So
Yeah.
that's why.
Okay. So just leave it, it could be just left as that. And then in the findings of fact,
All these statements.
yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, that's all I was saying. So that's why, Amy, your edit sort of negated that it would make it so it wasn't reflected at all. But that was the only conflict, I think.
Okay. So we'll just make sure, yeah, that all those are down there. And then do we ask Dave Dineski if there was some that we didn't get? Like, do we mention the conservation things? I guess it doesn't hurt, you're saying, Kathy?
Yeah, like I said, Amy, I mean, you know, perhaps I'm mistaken, but I thought in the past, you know, the questions had been, not in this decision, but the questions had been about, you know, should we include the Conservation Commission order of conditions? And, you know, again, those conditions are, you know, recorded and, you know, with DEP, you know, have their own appeal process, you know, recorded with the town clerk. And, you know, you all talked a lot about the Conservation Commission in this meeting. So I mean, in this hearing process. So I don't think that, I mean, to me, it just doesn't make sense that you take out the Conservation Commission.
Right.
But I mean, it's just a fact. I mean, no one, you can't argue either way. I mean, they did issue an order of conditions, period. You know, I mean, it's not anything controversial.
No, I was just trying to save space too, because it was getting bigger.
Well, it's
And,
one sentence.
well, I mean, there were a bunch of conservation things. So I didn't know, because I did go back and look at that decision, and we didn't talk about, you know, even the conservation approved it. But I don't care either way. I was just trying to be following other decisions.
Okay,
So
so,
this will definitely come out when it goes to Dave Dineski, this little, because this I was just using as reference, Kathy, this little paragraph.
I don't feel comfortable editing your edits.
Well, I can edit it right now because this has both of ours, and then send it to you. I'll
Okay.
take it out.
Okay, if the board is comfortable with that. I mean, I don't want to, I want to provide him what you have
Okay.
done.
So I'm going to unstrike out, if that's a word, these things, these
We get it.
facts. I was a math person. Grammar is not my strong point. Which is why I had the problems with the paragraphs above. Should I go back to that paragraph where Carrie and I had similar ones and then we can just combine it, or just take mine out? So right here, I changed, summarize the latest traffic report, but you had summarized the latest traffic report. So I'll take that out. Do you care? I mean, it's mine, so I'll just take it out if nobody cares.
Nope,
It's
don't care.
you, Carrie said the same thing. I'm trying to make it easier. I should have reviewed this earlier. I just ran out of time. This is huge.
It is.
The application was reviewed as a generic warehouse I was going into. But I think, did you include that, Carrie? You talked about the different types of warehouses. So should I'll take that out. I guess I talked about the traffic light. Was that in there somewhere?
no,
Does it matter? Because we didn't ask for a condition of traffic light. But I guess what I was trying to get at, he was saying that if this was more than a generic warehouse, you would need a traffic light.
Yes.
Maybe the traffic light sentence
oh,
can.
wait, it has a traffic light up top, though. It would trigger a traffic light.
Right. I was trying to take it out because this is your paragraph. So we don't have, I was trying to take out some of my things.
Oh, I thought you were talking about taking out the bottom paragraph that's highlighted.
Oh, no, that's the same as this. But I think these changes might be the same as yours here.
Well, if they're duplicates, I'd take them out, but if they're something
Right.
new, I'd keep them.
You said assumed lower intensity warehouse use. They did not account for more intense use. I could just say if it were a higher intensity use, generic warehouse, that would trigger a need for a traffic light on Lyman and Bartlett.
Sure.
I don't know. I'm just trying to combine the two so we can send it out and it's not confusing to town council. So I'm just going to take out this sentence now because you talked about it too. I just
Wait,
don't want to,
okay.
yeah, I don't want to get the applicant. I'm just trying to get mine out. Okay. For some reason, I can't get rid of, oh, because maybe it was his reviewed. Because it won't let me delete it. I will just unstrike out it. That word again. It won't even let me change it.
Amy, why don't we just leave your edits as they are, because he'll just say that this is repetitive or something, and that could be part of the feedback.
Okay.
How's that sound? And then at least that allows us to
Move on.
because we've got a lot to do tonight. And he's going to just say if it's repetitive, that's all.
Okay. For some reason, Kathy, I can't. I'm just trying to. This word reviewed is supposed to stay here,
Just type
but
it
it
in.
won't.
You can just type
Okay.
it in.
Carrie, can I just ask a question of the board where, at least I think if I heard this correctly, that Anthony had gone through these edits. It sounds like Michelle has gone through the edits, but Millie needs to go through them in more detail, or
Yeah.
spend more time on the Millie.
Yeah.
So might Millie have some edits that need to go to town council, or we'll sort of just take that as it, if it comes?
If it comes, yeah. I probably won't, again, because I have not done a decision with this detail before. And
If you
But
do
I-
notice one missing, yeah, we could probably.
yeah,
Okay, so are we at a point where this is the doc that's going?
I just had to ask one thing here. I crossed out this statement. Attorney Donahue discussed the footprint of the building, stating it had been reduced in size based on prior meetings with the Conservation Commission and design review, and could not be reasonably reduced further. He did state that, but I went to all the conservation meetings, so I went back and watched them and read the minutes, and they were not reduced in size based on prior meetings with Conservation Commission. Conservation Commission got the same design we did, the 150,000 square feet. It might have been reduced, like meeting with Mia or staff before it got to design review. But I definitely attended, and I went back and watched the hearings. And design review, I mean, not design review, but design review and conservation discussed this application in January, and it was submitted to us in December. So everybody got the same design, the 150,000 square feet. So I wanted to take out that statement only because I do know he did say it, but it wasn't true. So I don't know what to do about that. But I mean, we didn't have every single sentence from the hearing in there. But I just wanted to say why I took it out. And if anybody wants to go back and look at the Conservation Commission meeting in January, there were no minutes for design review, so I couldn't check that. But I know both meetings took place after the December submittal of the application, which was 150,000 square feet. So if they got a bigger building after we got the smaller building, it just wouldn't make sense. And I went back through all the minutes of 2019 for conservation, and I didn't see where they had ever talked about it before January of this year. So, I mean, he did say it, but I don't know where he got the information.
could you just follow that up and say this statement could not be verified
I
upon
mean, I think we can just
investigation.
take it out because we didn't include every sentence
Okay.
in the 3-hour hearing, so
Yeah.
I just took it out.
All right, well, why don't we just send it? And if board members come around and say, wait, that we do want that, or we don't think that, we can always fix it. But the purpose for now is just to at least get a gut check from council and see what he has to say.
Okay, so I'll send this one to you, Kathy, right now. So it's the final one that we just talked about.
Sure. Yep.
All right.
And I'd be interested to know, Kathy, when you send this over to him, I was surprised, and I don't know why. Well, I know I was surprised. But he didn't include or add anything that were groundwater specific findings, and this was for a groundwater permit. So I was surprised to not see him give more input on what would we say, not what would we say, but what were, we talked a lot about groundwater, and we talked a lot about the reasons why we denied the permit for groundwater, but there was no input from him on groundwater related findings. So I don't know, I didn't understand that, and I'd be curious to know why he didn't think they should be there, or why he didn't add them, or I don't know. I caught that. I thought I read the decision. I thought I passed it by mistake, and I didn't. So I don't know if there was a reason.
I mean, he review. Am I muted?
Oh, his job was to just review what you wrote, not add to it.
Well, he did. Yeah, basically he reviewed what I wrote,
Oh, okay.
but I mean, but his job, was not and is not to, go through all of the hearings and watch the tapes. And I mean, that's not, that's not his role.
Yeah.
So I think on the, with the groundwater, where I had, I'm just looking for that now. I mean, I think the only reference to groundwater, and I guess that's your point, Carrie, is that there's only a couple of references, is saying that the groundwater committee, had voted to recommend approval of the special permit.
It just didn't reflect that we denied it for groundwater related reasons, and they were specific to the permit because we walked down the criteria. So that, I guess maybe I didn't know exactly what his role was in this. Was his job to kind of look for that and look at our bylaws and make sure we matched our criteria, to the groundwater permits or not? And maybe his job was just to, like you said, he didn't go back to the hearings. His role
Right.
was to read through and make sure it didn't say anything maybe out of line or whatever the case.
Right.
So.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So that will go to him. We'll come back around. And then for everybody who I know is a lot to read, look at it again, make sure if there are maybe flag things in advance that you maybe don't agree with, or that you're ready to approve, so that we can just go straight down and you already have it flagged on your side, whether you're ready to approve the whole thing, or maybe you have a few things flagged, but we'll be ready to go and we can go through it quickly.
Sounds good.
Okay.
I have a quick question. I wonder if we should just hold like the date of January 12th, the week after the 5th, in case we need it. Like if we don't need it and everything's all set on the 5th, then we'll just send it off on the 5th. But say we need the 12th. I was wondering if we could just hold that date in the Zoom license.
The 12th is groundwater, correct, Fred? So the 12th is groundwater, and I honestly don't know at this point. We still have another week before people have to file ZBA applications, which may or may not include groundwater. So that may necessarily not be an available night, Amy, because you might be at groundwater and Fred. So, if right now, if we wanted to, And the 13th actually is not available. I have that tentatively for design review. So if you want to look at, actually the 11th, the 11th will be the Conservation Commission. So they'll have the webinar license
Oof.
on the
Do we
11th.
need the webinar, like, or can we do what we're doing tonight? Is this a webinar?
This meeting is a webinar. Yeah, I schedule all the planning board. I mean, if you don't have any public hearings, it doesn't have to be. We can look at the 14th.
Can we do the 11th
Oh,
without the
geez,
webinar?
no, sorry. I'm sorry. The, the 14th is cutting it too close.
Yeah. How about the 11th without the webinar? Do we need a webinar?
Well, I'll tell you this. I know there's two hosts, and they'll both have a meeting that night. There'll be the Board of Selectmen and the Conservation Commission. We can try. You could look at meeting earlier on the 11th. If you wanted to meet at. I mean, and I know this would interrupt people's workday, but I mean, if you wanted to meet at 4 or 5 o'clock.
Well, what if we get to the 5th and see if we run it? It sounds like if we don't need to run as a webinar, we have more flexibility.
Yeah, a little bit more. I still need a host, but yep. There's one webinar license and 2 meeting licenses. So there can only be a total of 3 meetings a night, which we have had happen.
Mhm.
All right, so is there a clear winner that week, or would we really be having to shift things around? The week of the 11th?
No, there really isn't.
All right. So why don't
Unless
we-
you wanted, I mean, to me right now, the only thing that would work is if you met earlier in the day on any one of those nights.
Okay, and we wouldn't have to book that now because nobody is meeting at that time?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
that's
what if we
fair.
just see what happens on the 5th? Because my goal is we really wrap it up on the 5th. I don't want to have to bring it too close. But to your point, Amy, we should, I mean, to have some, just in case, we should have an emergency button to press. And if there's not a lot of competition for that early slot, then we can probably get something taken care of. Well, let's
So
see.
if this goes to town council tomorrow, we'll probably get it in like a couple weeks, or I know Christmas is next week, but we'll have it before the 4th. That's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, I mean, that would be, again, I don't know what his schedule is, Amy, and if, he's suddenly away for 2 weeks, I'm sure there's someone else in the firm that will be, I mean, there's many people in the firm, and there's many other attorneys that we deal with, but for other matters. But Dave is our, land use person. But, I think it's safe to assume that, yes, we would have it before I mean, we have to.
Like a 5-day window or something, because this was a lot to cover.
Okay, so it's going to go to council, come back to us, and we will be back on the 5th for that one. So, right? Yes, good?
Mhm.
Okay. All right, so moving on, I want to make sure I get to everything. So 425 Whitney Street peer review update, anything for that, Kathy?
No, actually, where the peer review has not started, but it's just how the businesses work. We are awaiting the funding from Steris, which is on its way, and as soon as we have the check here at the town hall, then the consultant, the peer reviewer will start. So
Okay.
I would anticipate that should be, I thought it would be in the mail today. So I mean, it's just a matter of a couple days, I'm assuming.
Okay, then, and we have our public hearing was continued to January 5th, or the second date with Steris?
It was January 5th.
Okay, so really, we're not gonna have anything for them, most likely at that time.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe I'll suggest to them that they ask for a continuance.
Yeah, maybe so they don't have to go through,
Yeah.
I'm sure it costs money and all that to
Yeah.
show up. Okay, next on the agenda is traffic concerns. Kathy, you mentioned you got in touch with CMRPC. Anything with
We
that?
don't have a date yet. Sujatha and Sujatha has a very long last name, and I just don't want to mispronounce it tonight. But Sujatha is one of their traffic engineers, and I actually have a conference call with her tomorrow. And Trish settles on a couple other issues too, and so we're going to talk about the traffic suggestions or the traffic questions from the planning board, and then setting that up for Sujatha to come or, to zoom in on one of your meetings. And I certainly won't do it on the 5th. Why don't I look at the second meeting, which which is the 19th. You want to do that? Is that okay with everybody? Assuming it's okay with.
What, did she give any idea of what, she could talk about? Like we had talked about, can we get a regional look at what's going on? Or can we get a look at what other people are doing for traffic plans? Or
Yep.
are other people in this problem? Was she able to speak to all of that?
Yeah, I had asked her when we first spoke. I had talked about that the questions and concerns from the planning board were locally related and regionally related. So locally, what is it that the planning board can or should or be working with applicants on traffic mitigation and how that fits in with the staff and other boards. And then as far as a regional level, I asked her that what is she aware of? What are other communities doing? We're not the only communities being faced with warehouses. I mean, that's what's good or bad. That's what's happening in a lot of communities. I mean, you read about it almost every day with the Amazon warehouse being built or being proposed. So so she's going to look at that also.
Okay. And you said, did she estimate how many hours that would take? I know you mentioned that.
No, we'll talk about that tomorrow, Carrie. But you as a whole, for the town of Northborough, we have 17 hours. And part of what I'm talking to Trish about tomorrow is we're a little over budget on the open space plan. And do we need to make up for some of that by using, the local planning hours? And then also what the traffic review, how many hours would that take generally, as far as Sujata's preparation and then, attending a meeting.
Okay.
So does January 19th, is that a good meeting, a date to ask Sujatha if she's available? Or do you want to do it on the 5th?
No, because I'm thinking, well, I don't know how other board members feel. I'm wondering if we're going to run into trouble because we have to get our bylaws in place. And I want her to have enough time. And I also wasn't sure if any other boards or committees wanted to be a part of that. Like if the master plan implementation committee was up and running and they wanted to attend, or if the board of selectmen wanted to attend, or ZBA, or anybody really. I don't know if we want to open it up for, like, if we have these hours and we have this resource, I don't want to just limit it to us if it can be helpful to other groups. So I don't know if that's something we can even, I don't know how the other board members feel about it. If that's, oops, Millie, we lost you for a second. I was just saying, if we have that resource, do we want to make it open for other boards and committees if they are also curious, or staff, obviously, although I think you guys would be the most interested. So if we want to make it something that we offer to multiple groups, do we make it something, not just jam it in a planning board meeting? I don't know if board members have any thoughts on that, or.
Sounds good to me. I think it should be open to whoever wants to come.
Or Kathy, do you think people would be interested? Do you think implementation would be interested, or Board of Selectmen would be interested, or?
Well, as far as the implementation committee, I know the Board of Selectmen on the 21st, I think it is. That's when they will be, it's the 21st. That's when they will be, putting forth the people that they have interviewed. So, I doubt that the implementation committee will have met by your meeting in your second meeting in January. But we can certainly put it out to the people who are going to be assigned to the implementation committee.
Should
I
we-
mean, I think it's fine to do it at a planning board meeting.
Yeah, but my one concern then is just we need time to get these bylaws out the door. So does that jam us up? Do we just need placeholders by the February 4th, or do we need the full?
I have to provide language.
Okay. So I don't know if February is a better option for CMRPC, or I'm not sure.
Sure, if you want to look at the 16th, I mean, that'll be after you put in the bylaws.
That might make better sense. What does the rest of the board think? Should we get our bylaws figured out before we?
I
Sounds good
think
to me.
so. Yeah.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay, so I'll check with her about that date tomorrow.
Then we have time to build excitement over it.
Because traffic discussions are so stimulating.
I think people
Sorry,
are
Fred.
I know.
well, so one other thing I wanted to mention, so obviously a lot of communications have come to the planning board recently. I think they were actually addressed to the Board of Selectmen, but we were included. I think, did everyone have a chance to see some of the emails, some of the concerns over in the area over downtown where the warehouses are?
Yeah.
So, now it sounds like there's an issue of possible, whether they're using the neighborhoods as a turnaround, or, so again, it sounds like the condition of turning left isn't really happening. So I don't know, Kathy, if you ever, I know you said you were talking to them all. Was there any response from them, or any insight?
Yep, there has been there's been a lot of discussion that's been happening in-house. And I believe that at the selectmen's meeting on the 21st, I'm not sure if it's the DPW director or the town administrator. Okay. So I'm not sure who's leading that discussion, but it's on the agenda or will be on the agenda for the December 21st selectmen's. But between myself and Fred and we've had discussions with some of the managers of the various businesses over there. We have had the police chief, the town administrator, and I also think the DPW director, they've all had, conversations also. I mean, these are all, occurring, I can't say on a daily basis, but signs are going to be erected on town property. Some of the businesses have committed right away to putting signs at the end of their driveways. So it's still, and I know it never happens fast enough for the residents, and I totally understand that, but there's a lot of work going on, and I don't know what the schedule of the signs is, but that's been a lot of the discussion. And then there's letters that either have gone out. I drafted the letter, but it either it already did go out or it's about to go out. Again to all the managers. I mean, not so much the managers, but I mean whoever the head honcho is at each one of the companies that's physically located in Northborough.
Okay. And one other question was, one of our conditions was about that noise study, Bob, and I was wondering, did they ever provide a noise study to you, or?
The noise study consists of two parts. One
okay.
is, I'm sorry?
You did get one.
Not yet.
Oh,
I should be getting one before Christmas. That's what I've been told from the Gutierrez company. They said the study has been done. They're putting it in presentable format document, whatever, what have you. And that should be coming to me, I'm thinking next week. Okay. The noise study consists of two parts. One is the one when it's basically quiet. And then the second part is when the facility is up running at full or close to full operation, which from what I'm hearing is not going to be for several months. They're still trying to hire enough people to do the jobs. So if people are looking for a noise study for some sort of result, they're going to have to be patient because it's the part 2 of the study that allows you to see the difference between things at rest and things at full operation.
Okay, I see. So I think maybe the perception is that they are operating, but you're saying they're not fully operating. We're not even seeing the full operation at this point.
They're beginning to ramp up, but they've had trouble doing virtually anything in terms of what they plan to be doing. My understanding is that they're only using one of the 2 buildings at this point in terms of ramping up operations.
Okay. So then I think as a planning board, I mean, obviously, Michelle, you've talked about this a lot, about the whole, mitigation and what can we do and things like that. And Kathy, I'm glad you mentioned that about to Sujatha about what's our role in this and how can we, going forward with these applications, make sure that we're doing everything we can. And that enforcement piece we've talked about before, it's so difficult. I'd be interested to hear from what Sujatha has to say. Do other towns struggle with enforcement? I mean, we must all be in a similar boat. So I think that'll be really helpful. Any other things on the traffic concerns, traffic discussion or concerns in general? Okay. Master plan hasn't happened yet. So I guess we're down to the town meeting zoning bylaws, and Kathy, you sent over a memo today. I don't know if do you want to share that, or do you want me to pull it up, or?
No, actually, I didn't put it on this laptop, Carrie.
Oh,
So
sure.
if you have it,
Yep. Hold on.
and clearly I know that, or I would be shocked if anyone had time to look at it. And, our intent, or my intent, was obviously to have it out to you sooner, but that's just unfortunately how it goes sometimes.
Okay. Is this the right document?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So did you want to walk through it? I'll just.
Sure. I can, I mean, I can go through it point by point or just in general, Carrie, what?
No, I think we should. So we last left with what we presented, we narrowed down, we took a couple out, and then you and the team are going to look through and figure out what your recommendations were. So is this for each and every one that we did, or just a couple?
No, I have we put together a comment for each one of the proposals.
Oh, good. Okay, so I think walking through each one makes sense unless.
Okay.
Yeah.
So basically what myself and Bob and we included Fred this year on a zoning discussion, because some of these have to do with groundwater, specifically with groundwater, and some of the other topics that he's involved with as town engineer and DPW. So just starting off with, I mean, I didn't put these in any particular order, but obviously I'll go in the order of my memo. So the first one that we talked about was the commercial storage facility, and Amy had proposed some language about prohibiting commercial storage facilities in the Business West zoning district. And, again, we met, we discussed it. We talked about, are there any existing existing in Northborough now, because we're always, when we talk about changing uses or changing definitions of uses or affecting the use table in any way, we always have to be very mindful of, are we throwing someone into nonconformity? Because there's a whole host of issues that come with nonconformity. So in this particular instance, between the three of us, we did not come up with anyone in the business today, presently in the Business West, that we believe would be qualified as commercial storage facility. And so we didn't see an issue with changing it from actually, I'm not sure if it's allowed or special permit, but changing it to a prohibited use in the Business West. So that's the first one. The next couple, or the next two or three, which I'll lump together. One is about the proposed language for the non-conforming uses and structures section of the zoning bylaw, and that's in chapter 708 or section 708. And so again, nonconformity, big issue in any community. And after we vetted this, we paid careful attention to all of these, but after discussing it, what we really think needs to happen on not only the non-conforming uses and structures, the suggestion about changing contractors' yards, the definitions for that, and then possibly where those can be located or not located, and then also the list of prohibited uses and the suggestion about adding that to the zoning bylaw. We firmly believe that all three of those need to be vetted out with, in addition to the planning board, also with the zoning board of appeals, and that perhaps we look at, a joint meeting as opposed to, the planning board discussing it at one meeting and the ZBA discussing it at another meeting, that, we would suggest that we have a joint meeting and to talk about those, get input from the zoning board of appeals. They're the ones who deal with all of these, actually, and to get their opinions and thoughts on it. So that's what we had concluded with those three in particular. The craft brewery, we looked at the zoning bylaw specifically just for craft brewery, and are there places in the zoning bylaw that either would, obviously today don't specifically say something about craft brewery, but if that's all that we're looking at, does it fit in with existing definitions, and are we, do we even need to add something to it? Some of the questions we had about the craft brewery are the whether or not someone, and these are just things that we need to consider, is someone, or I guess what our thoughts were, or what the board's thoughts were. Are you looking at enticing or trying to encourage a brewery that we consider to be more of an industrial use? And so is it the brewery that you want as the industrial use, and then hoping or thinking that there might be, an accessory use as a restaurant and a tap room? Or are you looking at more of a restaurant that, is serving, is serving their own beer, but they're not necessarily manufacturing it as far as for production for sale, such as a Tree House or, Wachusett, where they're, filling and selling, bottles and cans. And then to expand upon that, what we wanted to talk to the board more about, and you all started to talk about this at the last meeting, was, is it just a brewery that you're thinking about, or should we be expanding this to include what I referred to, and there may be a better word for this, but artisanal food products. I think Bob had talked about this at the last meeting in particular, where do we want to just limit it to a craft brewery, or do we want to also look at distilleries, wineries, and then do we want to look at include other specialty, maybe, foods, cheese shops, the coffee roaster, a tea house. We were trying to, I think we were hungry when we were talking about this the other day, because then we came up with spaghetti sauce and barbecue sauce and, so, and it could be any of those, I mean, that really is, something that's very popular, not just in Massachusetts, and not just in New England, but that is something that is very popular. Hot sauce at the, Amy, I'm just thinking about the various people that have been at the craft, or the food tables that you have had at Applefest, with the various people that, I mean, there's been venison, there's been barbecue, there's been maple syrup. So we just wanted to have a bit of a more discussion on that so that we know how to kind of craft the language and, what's the home for it in the zoning bylaw. And then I've reached out to, especially with beer, or with a brewery, we have to look at water usage. And again, we're on, the town is on MWRA, so it's not probably an issue in Northborough. But we've got to look at water usage. We have to look at, available licenses and, and how does this get classified? I mean, this is just something that I don't normally do, but, with the Board of Selectmen, how this is all licensed. So these are just all the, the parts of it that we have to look at.
Kathy, if I may break in just briefly,
Sure,
it's not
please.
just water use issue, it's sewer capacity as well. A lot of the breweries and wineries and whatnot, they use an expansive amount of water, and they generate a huge amount of wastewater as well.
That's true. If it comes in, it's got to go out, right? Then the couple of other, 2 or 3 other bylaw proposals that you had presented, we talked about. With the accessory dwelling unit, we looked at that very carefully with what our existing accessory dwelling unit bylaw allows, and versus what we were talking about with this proposed legislation that's being reviewed at the state level. None of us are sure where that legislation is at this point, but some of the information that Bob had or has heard about from the building inspectors is that, the sort of the classes or the clients that you were talking about, Carrie, in particular, for elderly and disabled, there has been talk that those classes might be moved into the exempt part of the state statute. So it's not even something that we would necessarily have to address. And even if it wasn't, we believe that right now today, our accessory dwelling unit bylaw would allow, there's no prohibition as far as who can occupy an accessory dwelling unit. Our bylaw today talks about that whether it's the accessory dwelling unit or the main residence, that one of them has to be owner occupied. So we looked at some of the language changes or language suggestions, and we thought that some of it would end up being more onerous than helpful, and causing an additional encumbrance actually about having to check who the occupants are, how old they are. These are the things that we took out in 2009. And when we put in this accessory dwelling unit, and we tried to make it as broad as possible so that, again, it wasn't limited to specifically an in-law, or it wasn't limited to, a blood relative, or you could only rent it out to, your, child, student, coming back from college or something, but anybody could be in the accessory dwelling unit. So we thought that at this point, that the bylaw sort of covered all these various situations. And then we looked at, again, the size of it. And, there was some discussion obviously about, increasing the size. And so far, Bob went back and looked at how many of these come through, and there no, with the exception of one. And like we said at the last meeting, it was about a closet. Nobody has had an issue with the size. We didn't look at how many bedrooms people are building, and that certainly is something that we can do if people are concerned about that. But the 700 square feet should definitely take care of 2 bedrooms at this point. So right now we're thinking that our accessory dwelling unit covers some of the questions that were raised at the last couple of meetings. The next section that was talked about as far as possibly changing the language was in the groundwater protection overlay district bylaw. And there was some suggested language about changing the special permit criteria. And right now the groundwater bylaw has 3 very specific criteria that the groundwater advisory committee and then the special permit granting authority need to weigh, needs to consider. And when we looked at the sort of what I call the standard criteria that is in our bylaw and just about every bylaw in Massachusetts, because it's out of the state statute. But when we look at those criteria, like I just pulled out 3 as an instance or as an example that really wouldn't work to have the groundwater advisory committee or the SPGA make a finding about, is the proposed groundwater use. And again, what we're talking about is, how many gallons or how many products, of hazardous material might be in a particular building. So, is it a nuisance or a hazard to vehicles or pedestrians? Well, that really can't, because it's all about groundwater. The concern is it an issue with the groundwater? Does it affect the aquifer? Not that it affects vehicles or pedestrians. Another one of the criteria for general special permit is about being in harmony with the master plan. Well, again, or compatible with with the master plan. So to talk about to compare just as an example, to compare a paint store or a paint warehouse. How can you say whether a paint warehouse is in harmony with the master plan? It's an industrial use or is it a commercial use? That we could say is whether that's in harmony with the master plan or not. But I mean, to specifically talk about whether this company that's using or storing chemicals of some sort, is that in harmony with the master plan? And then another one of the criteria, and again, these are just 3 examples, but another one of the criteria is about, is it compatible with historic development patterns of the town? Again, I'll use, and maybe it's not the best example, but it's the only thing I could think of. But again, a paint company. How do we look at whether that's, compares to the historic development of the town? So that's why we thought, that the 7 criteria that are used for general special permit, are not applicable to the groundwater. And the 3 criteria that the groundwater bylaw contains, were very specific and were put in the bylaw in 1986. And they make sense. They make sense to us. If the board does want to consider, making changes to those criteria, again, like with the other bylaws, we think that in particular that the groundwater advisory committee, should be consulted with, and that the planning board, either reach out to the groundwater advisory committee, or, you have them come into a meeting, or, invite them to a meeting, whatever. But we think that there needs to be some input from them before, the planning board considers making a change. And then the last one was, I think this was the last one. The last one was about the existing conflict we have right now. As we like to talk about, we have to be careful of unintended consequences. And this was an unintended consequence from, it was either last year or the year before, where we now have, an applicant is required, if they want to build a duplex in town, and it's in the groundwater district. Most properties are in at least area 3, which is our least restrictive, but still the bylaw requires today that applicant would need to go to both the planning board and the zoning board of appeals, not only for a special permit, but because the way our site plan bylaw is written, they have to go to both boards for site plan approval. So obviously it's a duplication of efforts, and it has not happened in the past, but they're again an unintended consequence. There could be a time when one board says, yeah, we think this is a great idea, we approve your site plan, and then they go to the next board, and then the board says, no, we don't want to grant the special permit, therefore we're not going to grant the site plan. And now what does the applicant do? So Carrie, you in particular, you came up with language. I went through about how to fix that, and it's a change to the groundwater bylaw, and then I went through the rest of the zoning bylaw, checking to see if we needed to to make a change anyplace else, and right now my conclusion is that the only change that needs to happen is in the groundwater bylaw, and where we talk about right now, it talks about the industrial districts, anything in the industrial district and wireless communication facilities, that those special permits go to the planning board. And then, the language was proposed that, we just add in 2-family dwelling units, and that takes care of it. So that, and then just very quickly internally, there's and every year we like, we'll talk about this in May, and then we forget about it in, January, February, when we're making proposals for zone changes. In the groundwater bylaw, and this has nothing to do with a use, or it's just clarifying language. Right now, in the same section, actually, about the 2 families, or where we would add the 2 families, there is a sentence that reads, and this is about how the groundwater advisory committee interacts with the special permit granting authority. So it doesn't matter whether it's the planning board or the ZBA, but whoever is the special permit granting authority. So right now the bylaw reads that prior to the public hearing, and that public hearing is of the special permit granting authority board. So prior to the public hearing, excuse me, it reads right now that it says within 21 days following the public hearing, that the groundwater advisory committee would make their report to the SPGA. And that makes absolutely no sense, because the public hearing would be done and over with. And then the groundwater advisory committee, would make their comments. So we've been talking about this, and we need to change that to saying prior to the public hearing, the groundwater advisory committee will report, to the special permit granting authority. That's how it's been done since 1986. I don't know how this language was, this particular sentence was in the bylaw. But it's just one of those things that, to me, I consider this housekeeping. But again, if anyone, this is riveting. So if anyone, reads it, it reads right now that it's 21 days following the public hearing, the groundwater committee makes their report. And again, there would be no benefit to that. And the process we have set up is that, just like with the design review, the applicant meets, prior to the hearing, and then they make their recommendation, to whichever board. So we just want the language to reflect that. And then in general, and I know I've talked way too long, but in general, and we've said this before, we think that a lot of these changes that are being proposed this year are changes that need to really be explored by a larger audience. And that what we're recommending is that, as part of the master plan implementation committee, obviously, they're going to be recommending which sections of the master plan move forward first, and part of that whole process, should be based on suggestions in the master plan. How do they fold into our zoning? And then how do we we need to take a look at our zoning bylaw. And the process that we used with a community development plan, which was, we all refer to it as a mini master plan. Once that plan was done, we then took it and implemented that plan. And part of that implementation was, a couple of years later, we started a zoning subcommittee. The planning board wanted to implement, some of the suggestions that were made in the community development plan. So what was created was a zoning subcommittee. And I don't remember specifically that far back, but, I think there was probably about 10 or 15 people on that subcommittee. And it took 2 years to talk about zoning changes. So we, again, just in general, think that a lot of these, changes that are being discussed with the planning board right now, belong on that type of scale. Is that we need to, talk to the businesses, talk to residents, get some feedback on this. I know there's been, a lot of discussion recently by some people about, the contractors' yards, and whether they agree or disagree, and where should they go? Where, do we need them in town? But I think something like that, again, needs to be vetted out with not only the residents, but with the businesses and the property owners in particular, as to, how that may affect them or not affect them. And that's just one use. I'm just using that as an example because that just has been a topic of, much discussion lately. So I don't know if Bob or Fred has anything, but.
I was just gonna ask about duplexes. Did we take that off the table? Anthony, did you withdraw?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, thank you, Carrie. I completely, I missed that.
Oh, okay, that's okay.
So that change was, Anthony had, suggested that duplexes be removed from the residential C district, and that they now become a prohibited use. When we talked about that in-house, we saw we saw some concerns. We didn't really come down on yes or no that we as staff recommend it happening or not happening. But the conversation at the last meeting was about, at the last planning board meeting, focused on whether or not it should be conversions allowed, not allowed, tear downs allowed, not allowed. So we wanted to get some more clarification, because I know that wasn't a unanimous, opinion. I mean, I don't know if any of these are unanimous at this point, but, because I know it's all just in discussion mode. But I know that there was some questions at the last meeting about, whether conversion should be allowed. and then limited to the same size footprint that, that would, of the building that was being demolished. So again, I don't know if Fred or Bob have anything else to add. I've talked quite a bit.
Okay, so board members, let's see, maybe we go back and just figure out what the action we want to take for each one now that we have input from staff, how we want to proceed with our part in it. So each of us had previously either written or mostly written what would be included in the bylaw. So maybe it would make sense for whoever had been the advocate of it to speak to, how that works with the next step for that particular bylaw. So was that you, Amy, the commercial and industrial districts? Maybe we'll just start at the top, take it from the top.
Yep. So that was, so they agreed to go along with that. So I guess I would hope that the planning board would be interested in agreeing to bring it in front of town meeting. I did some more research on it over the last 2 weeks too, and commercial storage facilities pretty much are warehouses. And according to community development plan, our downtown business areas or our business west area even isn't the place for a big warehouse and trucking. And actually, after listening to the traffic study, the commercial storage facility, cold storage, is one of those high density cubes. So I don't know. I just think it's, the right place for those would be an industrial one. So I just didn't know how the rest of the board felt, if they wanted to go along with prohibiting it in business west. It's already not allowed in business east and downtown business, but it's allowed in industrial and business south. This is pretty much just taking off Main Street.
Mm-hmm.
And staff seem to be okay with it. So how does everybody else think? What does everybody else think?
I mean, I think I'm in agreement with that. I don't think there's a huge negative to writing it that way.
I'm okay with it.
I'm good with it.
I think.
Okay. So.
Okay. So this is you as well, non-conforming.
Yeah, I'm gonna do that one last. It's always the trickiest.
Okay, contractors, yeah.
I'll go to the prohibited uses.
Okay.
And I guess they want us to talk about it with the ZBA. And I do have a list, I can try to bring it out, of ideas for prohibited uses. And
Oh, do you want me to stop sharing?
sure.
Okay.
Let me just find it. Okay. So I'm going to share. I don't see the share screen. I think I have to move this. Okay, share screen. I have too many things open.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, here we go. All right. Do you see this? Is it on your full screen or? There we go. So, I still feel I'd like to bring it forward to town meeting this year. I was trying to make some sort of meet in the middle and not do use variance and then just have a list of prohibited uses. And I don't think these are any that even staff would really want in town, like a slaughtering house or a glue plant, fertilizer manufacturer. I mean, I don't see the harm in prohibiting these because we know that people can come in front of the board and ask for anything. And there are some parcels for sale that could house something like this. So I don't know. I just thought, why not bring it to town meeting and have some prohibited uses? But we can go down them one by one, or if people want to wait till after the master plan. I just think the master plan implementation process will take a long time.
Mhm.
And during that time, if one of these comes up, like a asphalt plant, I mean, we're going to have another neighborhood banging down our door saying, what did the planning board do and why are they allowing this? Because I can't think of anybody who wants to live next door to an asphalt plant.
So are you taking off the table the use variance and as an alternate suggesting we nail down prohibited uses?
I mean, I was, unless somebody feels like, I mean, I don't mind bringing the use variance forward, but we could discuss that under the master plan, especially when it comes down to like downtown revitalization. I took a class and I can share the packets, and they did say to get rid of the use variance and other loopholes, or else you'll never meet your goals because anybody can ask for anything.
Mhm.
And actually, that came up in a couple of the minutes I was reading. That, I mean, actually, even if it's fully prohibited, I don't think they can ask for a use variance. But I guess that would be a question for Kathy, Bob, or Fred. Say we have asphalt plant is specifically prohibited. That means there should be no use variance. That's what they add. Okay. Just like the marijuana that we have right now, it says no use variance. So all these items would say no use variance. So they could not overrule our zoning.
If I can give some background on a list of prohibited uses.
Yep.
The zoning bylaw used to have a section like this that contained a list of prohibited uses. A lot of these uses were on this. This is a very common list that older zoning bylaws have. I'm not saying it's right or wrong that some towns, you know, I'm not going to make judgment on another town's zoning bylaw, but we used to have it in Northborough's zoning bylaw. And again, going through a 2-year comprehensive process in looking at everything in the zoning bylaw, it was determined that this was a really antiquated way of talking about what's allowed or not allowed in your town. And instead, in the use table, as it reads today, is if it's not in the use table, if it's not a specific use listed in the use table, then it's a prohibited use. So, and that way you avoid you avoid mistakenly missing something that you might want to put on this list. So instead of thinking of every single thing that possibly you might want to prohibit in your town, you just generally say that if it's not in the use table, then it's prohibited. And so that's how the use table was changed in Northborough, and that's how it reads today.
That hasn't worked.
Well, it all depends on, I mean, everyone has an opinion about that, Amy. I mean, this town, and it doesn't make any difference to us as staff. Again, I mean, we repeatedly say this, it's not, these regulations aren't what we want or don't want. It's, you have the town adopts these regulations, and then we as staff have to, go about enforcing them and educating people on them. So Northborough is one of the towns that allows use variances. So if someone goes to the Zoning Board of Appeals and presents their case, I mean, you personally may agree or disagree with that, but I mean, that's the process. That's the fair process through Massachusetts general law and through Northborough zoning bylaw, is that, this particular town allows use variances along with dimensional variances. So, that's how, in your opinion, you think it doesn't work. I mean, of course, other people will, who are the recipients of variances will say it does work. but anyways, that's, again, that's the history of how the use tables here are in Northborough. So we used to have prohibited uses, and then it was changed and adopted to get rid of this laundry list, and instead to make it, say in the use table that if it's not listed in the use table, then it's a prohibited use.
Amy,
So
you're-
that's,
I just want to finish, but I'm not trying to insult anybody or insulting the town or staff or anything. But in our last minutes, when I was reading or watching the video, even talking December 1st, we talked about how Bob said that when applicants come to me, I have to find a use and pigeonhole it in and find where it goes. And there are even uses I emailed, like, well, say a car or truck rental. We don't have that in our zoning bylaws, but what would that fall under? So it seems like even though our bylaws say if not permitted, then prohibited, you can't account for everything. So a lot of the uses that people might think are prohibited end up in different neighborhoods or not neighborhoods or on different building zones. Because, I mean, what would you think that a car rental facility would fall under? I mean, I would have guessed it would fall under the auto uses, and they're not listed under auto uses, so I would think they're prohibited. But when I asked Bob, and I'm not picking on Bob at all, and but he said that would be retail, and I wouldn't think a car rental would be a retail. So, and car rentals aren't listed on our zoning bylaw or on the use table. So, I mean, if you read asphalt plant, someone could read that and say that's light industrial, so that's allowed in industrial, even though it's not listed in our use table. Someone who applies for an asphalt plant can say, well, that's light manufacturing. So it's very.
If anybody ever came to me and said an asphalt plant is light industrial, I'd ask him what he's smoking.
I know,
Okay,
but still,
that's heavy industrial. Be reasonable.
I'm not trying to pick on anyone. I'm just trying to say that if not permitted, then prohibited is vague.
Mhm. Okay, so either or else it goes back to the use variance. So this was your midway point, so as to not just completely eliminate. Okay,
Yeah.
are there any board thoughts on this in general?
I mean, I do think that having a use variance does open itself up to a lot of issues with general definitions of things like light manufacturing or contractors' yards or kennel use or things like that. So those, to try to find a place to put those things when they come through can be tricky. They're not prohibited, but they're not specifically designated to go anywhere. So I do think that this is worth looking into.
Other thoughts?
I for one would be interested in pursuing this direction in terms of prohibited uses. The only thing I'd want to kind of take a little bit more time is defining this list, make sure we've got everything we want here, and then make sure that there's things here that we would not want on here. But I think it takes out first I think it's going to save staff in the town a lot of time from cycles of processing things where if it's clearly defined whether it is prohibited or not. And I think this might be a good direction for the town.
Okay, any other thoughts on this? I mean, I've heard many times that towns are getting rid of use variances, and the fewer have them, fewer allow them than I'm missing that statement completely. Start over. More towns are getting rid of them than not. We still have ours. Ideally, I think we should at some point consider that, but as I said before, I think that takes a little more lead time and different groups to think about impact and consequence, and maybe that comes down to, like Amy, you said, master plan implementation as well. So if we're having trouble with things happening that we don't anticipate. I mean, otherwise we're never going to be able to, we're always going to be a step behind. So we realize, oh, wait, we didn't mean that, but now it's in the, going through the process, and the neighbors are upset, and the applicant's spending all this money, and we're always in this constant catch-up mode. Maybe there is a defined list of things we know we don't want, so let's not make anybody waste their time. I don't know. I'd be interested in I don't want to make the list too long or put, there was some on here that we didn't want to include, I think, towards the end, but at least being in agreement what we don't want, so that we don't end up, chasing bylaws just one after the other as we catch them. It seems, I don't know. I hear what Kathy's saying, that we've done it before and we switched
Yeah.
it, but something is causing this continuous, it seems like last year especially, or maybe the year before, it's just one after the other. We just kept getting that stalemate over the bylaws. So
Mhm.
maybe this is a good way to approach it.
And the two towns that I found this same list in actually just redid their bylaws. Like they did a whole zoning recodification. So they didn't come from old bylaws. And maybe they were old, but maybe these two towns too said, you know what, maybe we just better protect ourselves. And I'm sure we won't catch everything, but if there's anything, maybe at the next meeting, we can go down the list, or if someone has something to add or something to delete.
I would recommend, if you're going to go this route, that you pay very close attention and put in really well-written definitions of what each of these uses are,
Mhm.
and limits in terms of, like you said, item P. How do you qualify an offensive noise? How do you qualify an offensive smoke? Those will need to be qualified, because if you leave them variable, it's going to be no different than what you have now. Okay,
Yeah.
because what you're trying to do is take all the judgment out of everything, including the ZBA. And what if you're going to go this route and be that tight with things, you better be able to have a clear definition and clear performance standards, and how they're going to be measured and how they're going to be fined and enforced. And it's up to you guys to write it.
Can I make a comment?
Sure, please do.
So some of them are pretty evident about why they would be on the list. I think others get into a very gray area.
Yeah.
So I would just recommend to the board that they stay in the area of where everything seems to be pretty black and white. Like, yeah, you don't want an asphalt plant, but you do want landscaping businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you probably don't want, a concrete batch plant, but you do want a contractor shop, right? Because we talked about maybe modernizing the language of what's contractor yard or shop is to today's standards for tradesmen, plumbers, electricians, things like that. When you look at vehicle storage yard, I think you want to look at, is this going to affect the car dealerships on Route 9 who store some of their additional vehicles up on some of the industrial areas? I mean, is that an unintended consequences that were affecting their business? You do have a section that Northborough owns that's on 290 and Route 9. Is a billboard so bad? I don't know. It's on a major highway. So there are some things in here that I think are are gray areas, and then some that are like, yeah, that makes sense. You probably don't want a commercial slaughtering house in your town.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're looking at doing something where staff has already said, oh, I don't really think this is a great idea, but you're saying, let's give it a shot and let's build upon it, then I would start with things that are very specific that will not have any unintended consequences. And then maybe those gray areas you address next year. Because you already know that you're going to run into problems if you put landscaping businesses down here or contractors down here.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I can do for hopefully the next meeting is, and before when some of the bylaws have been considered, as far as changing what is, allowed or not allowed for the ZBA's authority, is we've looked at just what has the ZBA issued in the past? So, how many use variances have they issued, in the past 5 years? So I mean, that's the kind of information that you should want to have, so is it a problem? Maybe it is, I don't know if it is, but that's one of the things that I can take a look at is, I mean, if that's information that you would like, which I think would be helpful, is have they issued use variances recently, and what have they been issued for?
Yeah.
The other thing, oh, and I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Oh, one of the things that sometimes when staff recommends zoning bylaw changes is, we look at, has there been a pattern of something that has been granted by the Zoning Board of Appeals? So therefore, if it's something that, either residents are continually seeking a variance for, or, commercial property owners are continually seeking a variance from and being granted it, whether it's a resident or a business owner, then that's something that you should look at of like, well, geez, you know what? Every year 6 people are applying for this, and every year they get granted. So, we should take a look at that particular, bylaw. So that's something that I don't, just in a 2-week time, I don't know how thorough I can be, but certainly with the use variances, that's easier than taking a look at, like say maybe dimensional variances, but let me at least give you use variance information.
Okay, that sounds good. Why don't we, it's already 9, so I want to make sure we cover all of them. So it sounds like we want to continue down this road to take a look at this one. So Amy, I'm going to have you stop sharing so we can go down to the next one.
Okay. Let's see. So should I share the next one?
No, I was just going to go back to the memo to go down the list.
Okay.
So
I was going to
craft
talk
brewery-
about craft brewery. Yeah.
Yep. Oh, do you have stuff to share? I'm sorry. Is that what you meant?
Well, I might on some, but with craft brewery, I did want to talk about it. I don't know if that's something hopefully we could get in this year. I'm still hoping, but I understand all the different like tea rooms, coffee rooms, and I think those great. But I'm wondering if they're different than like the towns I looked at. The brewery, distillery, winery was different than an artisan, which we could add to, but I don't know if they would fall in the same category without getting too confusing. Like, I guess what I was picturing, and then everybody can tell me what they were picturing, but if we have some warehouses in industrial zones that would like to be reused, that's what I see being used as the brewery, distillery, winery, because they do have the big kegs and they need the big space. And then they do have a little tasting room in the front, or even have a little outside sitting area like treehouse. So that's what I was thinking. Like when I looked at the ones that I shared, they had the brew pubs, which were on like the main commercial areas. And those were the ones that had food and beer. And then they had the brewery distilleries, which were the ones that were in the industrial zones.
Mm-hmm.
So I just didn't know how hard it would be to do. And I know Bob said he has to check on water and stuff. I was just trying to think of a reuse, because we talk about reuse in the master plan. And I know they've been popular in a lot of towns.
Okay. Any thoughts on this one?
I mean, I have gone to on this road trip quite a few of the breweries and distilleries, and they're definitely in the warehouse area. A lot of them do have also, they offer things like tours, and they do offer either food trucks or some of their own foods, like Kathy was mentioning, that some of them expand into more of a an artisanal food option as well.
And I know with COVID, I went to the new brewery that was in Lancaster. And I think because of the COVID rules, they had to serve food with the beer. That was like a rule because you can't have a bar.
Right.
So I don't know. I saw a whole bunch of towns where they had a brew pub and a distillery, and the distilleries were an industrial, and the brew pubs were more of a restaurant on like Main Street. And I think those were included in the Word document I had. And maybe we could talk to a different town that's doing it. Like Framingham did it, and Marlboro's been doing a lot of them.
Well, crafting the bylaw isn't the issue, because I mean, again, there are a lot of towns that are doing this. So we just wanted to get a little bit more direction of, if you wanted to, and which is fine, if you wanted to keep it towards more of the, the brewery,
Manufacturing.
distillery, versus the, making it more broad, to include other kinds of, like we said, just name your food product, cheese, barbecue sauce, maple syrup. But so I mean, if that's something that the board, wants to pursue as far as the brewery, we can certainly do that.
I don't mind opening it up, but I just don't know if it makes it too confusing. Like, I know the farmers market, like you were talking about with the maple syrups and stuff, a lot of those people sell their products at Davidian and places like that. So I don't know if that will confuse the brew pub distillery. I'm not trying to pigeonhole the brewery into one thing, but I just don't know if it'd be hard to craft a bylaw that it would include it all. Unless you can think of a way to do it.
Yeah, I guess that is the issue. If it's easy to do, that's great. But if we need to crawl before we walk, I'm okay just focusing on a smaller piece.
Because we have specialties, and they sell tea and food, right? But they've never been denied. And there's Armino's coffee, but they don't serve food, I don't think.
No, I mean, like, specialties is just, I mean, it's a restaurant.
The restaurant.
Yeah.
They're not producing tea, they're not growing tea, I mean, that's not, that's a restaurant.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess if you can do more than beer and wine, but I just don't want to confuse it. Because I think it seems like alcohol has a lot of, it talks about pouring licenses and all sorts of stuff like that I don't think would be in the same definition as someone who is selling cheeses.
Well, Millie, this is your world. What are your thoughts?
It sure is. I mean, honestly, I think it's worth looking into again to see the distillery option, the brewery option, or a cidery or something like that. But also, they do have tasting. Oftentimes, these places do have tastings. They do have tours that go through these places. Is there a need to expand it into something that is bigger? I don't know, but I think it's worth looking into.
Could be a good use for White Cliffs.
It's a good
Next
place to
one.
start.
Right?
So Kathy, what kind of direction exactly do you need? We haven't really given an answer to, I guess, to what you're looking for. You're asking, do we just want a brewery, or do we want to, make it all encompassing? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, and I think what I'm hearing is that we'll stick with the alcohol for to start with. Is that fair? I mean, is that what people are thinking? That's what the bylaw will concentrate on. It'll be, as Amy, had presented the idea about, distilleries, brew pubs, that type of thing.
Okay.
Gary, one of the other things we talked about when we were discussing this was that some breweries come along with a significant amount of traffic. Specifically, the brewery out in Charlton has caused quite a stir on Route 20, even though it's a state highway. They have fairly long lines, traffic congestion, irritated businesses around there for people turning around and stuff. So it's more complicated than just saying, oh, we should have a craft brewery. Much as I like a cold beer as much as the next guy, I think it's a it's something else to be concerned about besides the utilities.
Mhm. Hmm. Okay, well, that's interesting. Is this something we want to start with? And then, we'll obviously have hearings and that's a great point about traffic. We'll have to figure out, where are we zoning this only industrial? Is that our thought? Because that's our big traffic area right now.
Right. I was thinking industrial, but it could be anywhere. It could be the Barefoot Road area. It could be, I think Bartlett Street is full, right? Almost everything. I mean, there's a couple buildings maybe.
Okay. All right. Well, it sounds like members flagging the traffic piece and also the water piece. Are board members wanting to at least start with the brewery and distillery component?
Yeah.
Okay. And then we'll have to think about zoning where that really belongs. I mean, the size, you're saying warehouses for the size.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
and there are some places even in Business West that could have done, but
Okay. And for the ones that we're, that we want to pursue, what are we, going back to, what is the next step, Kathy? Do you want to keep this moving along? What would the next right step be?
Yeah, well, I mean, so far, I mean, the commercial storage facility, that's a easy one. Look, I don't know where you landed really on use variances and prohibited uses, other than, I'm going to provide you some information on
Yep.
past, like within the last 5 years or so. And then the craft brewery, I'll work on putting together a bylaw language.
Okay. All right. So then I'm just going to try to move through these and then we'll swing back around to the top. So accessory dwelling unit, this makes sense to me. It does sound like the bill is not finalized yet, and it does sound like a dimensional variance could solve this problem if there is one. And so far, it sounds like I've presented a problem that may not exist, so there's no need to rush to solve for it. And I agree with the issue about verifying age and relationship. And then even if you do that the first time, you're always going to have to keep track of it. And it's at this point, it sounds like it would be difficult and cumbersome. But the one thing I do want to ask about is the special permit in RA and RB. So if you were an RA or RB, you would need a special permit and a variance. So I guess I don't understand why there's a special permit for RA and RB. And should there be? Do we need one? Then you wouldn't have to go through all these hoops if you were to want to put some sort of ADU. Do we know why we have that?
I think it was all part of the, and I can't say for sure, Carrie, but I think it was all part of the discussion in the residential, and Michelle might have some memory on this too, but in the residential A and the residential B, that given that they're larger lots and a lot of, especially in residential A, are these, pork chop lots where they're, very oversized, sort of almost, little mini estates on their own, that people just felt at the time when we were doing the zoning proposals that with both duplexes and the accessory dwelling units, that it's just not something that I think people expected on the larger lots, but I honestly can't remember that it was like significantly compelling. I think it was more of, especially with the accessory dwelling units, it was more of a way to introduce the concept of the zoning and let's see if it did work. And then, perhaps go back and look at, does it make sense in other zoning districts? So, again, I don't remember something that was like so overwhelming of like, oh my God, we could never have those in other residential districts. But I do remember with the accessory dwelling units, it was talking about, let's introduce the idea, let's see if it works. And, and then are there things that we need to change or tweak? So that's how that one specifically landed in residential C and some of the other the smaller districts.
Okay. How does the board feel about opening up RA and RB for accessory dwelling unit by right, not having a special permit? So that way, if you need a variance, you don't have to do both. Or is that worth pursuing? I guess we don't have to, I don't want to decide without having that information, but is that worth pursuing?
I mean, I think there were two that came in front of the ZBA at two meetings I was at, and I think they were on RA or RB, but I don't, maybe when Kathy's going through the use variances, I don't know if you'll see the accessory dwelling ones at the same time, to see what they were asking for. I mean, to me, it doesn't seem like it'd be a big deal to allow them in RA and RB. I know, Michelle, what do you think, being a realtor?
Oh, right, Michelle.
I mean, I think I'm not quite sure. I don't remember why, Kathy, we didn't include it in RA and RB back when we were doing the rezoning. I think it was so new and such a new concept that at the time we thought the use would more be for people who are in smaller lots and looking to expand. So I'm okay with it. I mean, I don't think there's going to be an issue with it. I mean, certainly we could ask, as Amy said, if there's been two applicants that have come before for, did you say it was RA or RB, Amy?
I can't remember, but I do think it was for a special permit for those zones, but I can't remember, or maybe it was a variance for a bigger size.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk to the ZBA, we could ask them why. And I mean, it seems like something that we're trying to, it's a form of housing that we're actually trying to promote. So to me, it doesn't seem like a bad thing. I'm not, I don't see it as a negative.
Okay, so how about do we wish to pursue it, and then we can always tweak it, or if somebody thinks of a problem or something.
Yeah,
Okay.
I guess I'd like to know what might be the downside or the unintended consequences.
Right.
I mean, I think the issue is that some of these larger lots, the houses are, 3,000 square feet or 4,000 square feet, and they don't need the additional space. They have it. Whereas some of the other ones might be smaller. They're 1,800 and they need that extra square footage to add on that in-law suite or whatever they're looking for. So maybe that was the mindset when we were talking about it years ago. I mean, remember we're talking about this 11 years ago.
Yep. Okay. All right. But it sounds like we're okay with at least not pursuing the entire originally proposed bylaw, but at least taking a look at that use table and seeing if it makes sense to make that by right for RA and RB.
I think one of the only concerns what people had when I first started on the planning board, I think there were concerns about Airbnbs, right? We never followed it up because I guess we're not a hopping town with a big Airbnb rental. But once we get that big brewery, we might be. Just kidding.
Okay. All right. So for this one, so I see the point here. My only concern, the problem I was trying to solve for is that it's very confusing to everybody. And there seems to be like a pick a path thing where one person's up for one thing and one person doesn't have to do another thing. So I just want to read through this again before we make a decision on moving forward or not. So I want to follow along with what staff is saying here. I understand what they're saying, but I kind of want to follow it along and just think about it a little bit. So if you guys don't mind holding on this one, I'd like the chance to just think through what I'm trying to solve for and to see if this is actually the problem I think it is or not. Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, and then if we do anything for groundwater, timing wise, I mean, I'm not opposed to it. Maybe it's something that comes in the form of a memo, or Amy, you as our representative can shuttle back and forth. I don't know if we can do have time for an actual meeting to sit. It may not take that long, or timing wise, it may not work out, but it's one way or another. I do think it's good to get feedback from groundwater. This sounds like it was okay, the duplication of efforts. This looks okay to me. Any comments on this? Does it look okay to move forward?
I guess I'm trying to figure it out. So if there's a special permit, so if it's a duplex on groundwater, it'll go to the groundwater advisory committee. And then does it come to the planning board because we grant the special permit for duplexes?
Unrelated. This is an unrelated change, right? This is while we're here. So this is unrelated, Amy. Yeah, this is the first part, which is basically just, it's added language into that section where it says who's doing what, and it just adds the planning board will do the special permit for if there's a duplex involved.
For groundwater.
Yep.
Okay, I guess that's what I was just trying to figure out.
And this is part 2 is a different change that I think it sounds like Kathy and Bob noticed while we were in this section.
Okay.
Does this sound good to move forward with?
Sure, I guess I'll have to read it offline because I'm a little confused, but I think I get it.
Okay, and then Anthony, you have the duplex one. It sounds like staff's recommendation. Now I'm forgetting it, that it's not written down.
I forgot to.
We were just we didn't come up with a a recommendation about a yes or a no, but and I do again apologize that I forgot to put that in there, Anthony, because we did talk about it. But it was more of a there was a conversation at the last meeting about conversions. Should duplexes not necessarily, I think the conversation was that not a brand new on a vacant lot, a new duplex would be prohibited, but if someone wanted to convert their single family home into a duplex using the same footprint, that was some of the board members were saying that was okay to consider.
Well, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but I think for me, and what I believe is that the intent here is to allow the homeowners to have some ability to, if they wanted to do a conversion, that's fine. My concern with mostly of all of RC, a lot of RC, is just the footprint of the size of the building in comparison to what most of those houses look like today. So if it were a conversion, that it maintained the same footprint that it's in currently. And that's in terms of going forward, I still would like to pursue to prohibit duplexes in RC, but allow conversions on the same footprint.
Can I make a comment?
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks. So I understand the preservation of some of the neighborhoods where a lot of this may have started, like a Pine Haven, or I mean, really has not happened in Northgate. It was on Route 135. I will say to the board that I think you have to step back a little bit and look at, are you allowing new construction to happen in your community? Okay, that's the first thing. And when if you're allowing new construction, that means, new foundation, new tear down, your new construction. If the only thing you're allowing is a single family house, then your price point is immediately into the $750-900 range. So although we've already talked about duplexes, who would think like $500,000 is affordable? It's more affordable than an $800,000 house. But what you have to look at is is the board, when you start to limit cluster housing or any type of density housing, are you eliminating any new construction in Northborough? I mean, think about any type of new construction happening. It is just not happening. So you have to wonder, is something like this. Now, I understand protecting the neighborhoods. I agree with what Bob Federico said. I think it was either Bob or Fred said last week, which was the land values have increased so significantly and they're not coming down. And there's probably no sign that they're going to come down because there's such a shortage of new construction that what's happening is in Northgate, even at a tear down is at 325, 350. You're talking about a developer has to take to get 150 feet of frontage, because the majority of Northgate is 100 feet of frontage, and the majority of the houses in town are 100 feet of frontage. We've now said, okay, to protect the neighborhoods, like make it 150. I guess the board consider like 175 or 200, although that seems like a lot of frontage. What I'm saying is in a Northgate or even in a Pine Haven, which by the way, these 900 square foot ranches are now selling for $400,000. Now, let's say it's in bad shape, 350. Get two of them together, like Anthony indicated, might happen in a Northgate area. That means the developer has to come in and pay $700,000 for the houses, probably another 100 to tear them down and get everything set up to go, and then build them, which costs you about $500,000, and his profits just aren't there. They're just not going to do it. I think what you're going to find is that there's pockets of raw land throughout town that maybe someone wants an opportunity, and you've already covered yourself in that because you've already says it has to go with the character of the neighborhood. So I think what you want to look at as a board is, are our messages going that we don't want new construction? Because you don't have a lot of land left. And so if you're saying we only want new construction, is it for only these big colonials that are going to go for a price point of 800,000 to 900,000? So that's one message you have to think. And then when we talked about this before, because I know I was part of this discussion and I voted for it, we talked about basically the whole intent of duplexes was preservation, right? It started with what's happening to Pine Haven and what's happening to Northgate. And that was like 3 or 4 years ago. And then all of a sudden the market took off because there is no statewide, there's just not a lot of new construction going on, or it's limited new construction because land value is so expensive, right? I mean, you should just have developers come in and talk to you about it, right? That's what's happening. And that's why it's attractive to a developer, for a developer to do a duplex, because the land value, that's why they're doing that. So I understand the preservation, and that's why we added 150 frontage. If you go through Northgate and if you go through Pine Haven, they all have 100. Not many people have 150. So we went up to 150, and then to make it even more protect the neighborhoods, we then said it has to go along with the character, right? And so you have already things in place. I would just say if the board is going to consider this, is a couple of things. You have to consider allowing it for conversions, because that's the way you save your 2-family houses. That's what people who once had 2-family houses in the 1900s, 1920s, and 1940s, converted them to single families and now want to convert them back to 2 families. It's what every town east of here is doing, and it's how they're preserving these 2 families. So that's something that I would not vote in favor of this unless we did the preservation of the 2-family houses. And then the other thing is, you have these pockets of raw land that are within the community. I'm not quite sure why you wouldn't want to allow that to allow the ability for what we're calling, and I know you're shocked that $500,000 is affordable, but it is affordable compared to 800 or 900,000. Keeping in mind that most ranches now and capes in these 2 significant neighborhoods that you guys keep on bringing up are well over 400,000. So, I mean, I think you just have to sort of look at the bigger picture and look at, are we as a board prohibiting new construction? Now, what's going to happen is if you prohibit a new construction, they're just going to tear down and build up a house. And you don't have to go to too many towns east of you to see neighborhoods consistently change. And to think that Pine Haven's not going to change, most of those people who went into Pine Haven and bought their houses at 200 and gained all their equity, they're just going to build up. You're going to see these neighborhoods building up, and then you're going to see them go into the ZBA asking for variances to build out, because that's what happens with these older neighborhoods that were built in the 50s and 60s. So I just feel like we already talked about the frontage and about complying with the neighborhood. I don't know why you would want to eliminate it almost throughout the town. And by the way, no one's going to go out and build duplexes out in the outskirts of town because that land is even more expensive. So the numbers don't work. And I think it was Fred last week who talked to, or the last meeting talked about this.
So I think where my head is at is, I mean, we all know that the market is cyclical. Who knows where we're at in the current market? But there will be a time where I don't want to say correct, but it'll go back down again. And maybe those market dynamics will make it more attractive, or maybe more capable of buying multiple lots and expanding. I don't know, and I think everybody, all the arguments that were made are valid in terms of you're not going to see somebody buying, multiple houses and putting the lots together because it is too expensive and the math doesn't work. But I guess what I'm thinking is let's get ahead of it for when the market does go the other direction, so we don't spend a year and a half or a year trying to, having to correct a problem. So that's where my head is at. But
Okay. Any other thoughts on this one?
I just don't want, and I'll go make this statement, this board coming out to look like we are anti-new construction.
Mhm.
You are the planning board, and that's where subdivisions and new construction come before you. Just as important as commercial and industrial.
Do we feel that the special permits we have in place protect us for now, for this period of time until we get a better sense of, like Anthony, to your point about the market? Is there, I mean, I wish timeline wise, I know we expect a housing study at some point, I believe, out of the master plan, but I just don't know when that's going to come. So to your point, Anthony, I don't want to always chase the problem. Is the special permit enough, or do you see it as a problem where we're going to be, over, until we do something about it?
well, no, I think if there, and I could be completely wrong in any and all of this, but if there is going to be a problem, it's going to be several years away. So I'm being proactive, but I mean, if there's enough pushback from the board, I have no problem with, waiting another year or two or whatever it is.
Okay, those are two extremely different views. Any other thoughts?
Carrie, can I just ask a question? Because again, it always, at least for me, it always starts with is what is the issue or the problem, and then let's identify that, and then how do we fix it? So is the issue, and Anthony, I'm not picking on you, but is the issue the kind of housing, that a two-family is in a predominantly single-family neighborhood, or is it the scale of the new housing? Because if it's the scale of the new housing and the use is okay, as a two-family, then that's can be managed through setbacks and partly design standards or guidelines. But So I think if it's a, are people thinking that they're too big? And so we need to look at, are you thinking it needs to be a bigger lot size in the residential C district?
No, I think the intent here is, and this is why I said that I feel conversions are absolutely fine as long as they're within a footprint that's similar with the rest of the neighborhood. And I think it has to do with symmetry in the neighborhoods. And it's when you said scale, yeah, I think a lot of people in town are concerned about this different scaling, in where you've got a bunch of similar size houses, and then you have something that doesn't fit into everything else in a neighborhood. And this is where, this is my motivation to pursue this. Whether it would be, I don't know what's going to happen in 5 years from now. And that's, I guess, where I'm thinking of getting ahead of it.
Because I think if we're talking about conversions, if the, if you want to propose, saying that a conversion is okay on the existing footprint, you might as well just say no duplexes in the RC, because nobody is going to build a duplex on a 900 square foot foundation. And then that makes the duplex 450, one side of a duplex, 450 square feet. That's a studio apartment. So by saying that they're okay by conversion, it's just, that it's just not going to happen. It just doesn't work. The numbers don't work, and the real estate market just doesn't work. No developer is going to, nor will no developer build one, but no one's going to buy one. That's, Fred just pointed out, that's smaller than an accessory dwelling unit. So it's not going to happen. So I don't even think you need to put something in about conversions. But if it's about, not having duplexes in the RC, I think you just need to say that.
Well, no, I think, and there has been instances where there were maybe much older houses that were converted, and Michelle even said it, I believe, where you said that they converted from two families to singles, and then later on wanted to convert them back. There's not a lot, but I'm just saying, at least allowing the homeowner to make that decision, should they have the, the footprint or the size of the house that they could do that in. Obviously, you're not going to take a 900 square foot house and make it into a two-family.
I think when we passed this bylaw a couple of years ago, was it 2 or 3? We had it tied to design guidelines that we never followed through with. So I think for me, maybe it's a scale thing, Kathy, when you brought up the problem, because there were instances that I think I saw Judy present where it was very well hidden and Design Review does a great job, going, speccing these things and making sure they look good. But we never had that book of Design Review guidelines that we settled on, where, it's sure enough, as soon as we passed the bylaw, I think we got a proposal for like a couple giant, all the same standard looking white houses, but that wasn't really in the design guidelines that were developed at that time. We just hadn't approved them yet. So we've almost been behind in getting like, what do we want it to look like? Again, the Design Review Committee does a great job making them look nice, but we never got that book that we agreed on and wanted it to look like. And maybe in our minds, we're all picturing different things because we never came up with that standard look and feel. I don't know.
One of the things you may want to think about in terms of scale, I've heard that used a lot tonight, is that, a single family home in Northborough, provided it meets the setbacks and height requirements, can increase its size by 80%. Okay, without needing a variance or a special permit. Okay, so if you've got a small house on a small lot and you wanted to expand it, and as long as you stayed within the setbacks and the height restrictions, you can fill up the lot, and you can just about double the size of your house, and that's for a single family home. So you have the potential of having a neighborhood that is pretty much homogeneous in terms of one house to the next and the next. And then right in the middle of it is this house that's, gone up a story and gone out with a den on one side and a 3-car garage on the other. And, there goes there goes the scale, in comparison to the rest of the neighborhood. I just wanted to make you aware of that, because that is allowed by right.
When did that change? I'm just curious, because I did an addition. I could only go 50%.
I don't know when it changed, but as long as I've been here, which is, well, my first rodeo through here was 7 years ago. It was in effect then. So I don't know when it came before that.
Okay, well, we're getting late and we have a couple more to cover and I want to make sure we can get through this. What do we want to do with this one? Do we want to pursue it or do we want to table it? Any thoughts? Michelle, it sounds like you don't want to pursue. Did we lose Michelle?
No, I'm still here. I just think that we need to work on exactly what we're trying to do with it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I agree with, preserving the houses, and I understand preserving the neighborhoods, but I don't think it should be completely throughout the whole RC district, which is a huge district in Northborough, if there's land available. I think the board needs to consider, you're a planning board, are you becoming that you don't want new construction?
Anthony, do you want to still pursue?
I think it's a valid assessment by Michelle that maybe it is too wide scope. Maybe it needs some further thought and research. I'm okay with tabling it, and then looking at different options in the years to come.
Okay, Millie, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Michelle brought up some good points. And I guess my question was originally, how often does this happen and how urgent is it to work on it for this session? And if we can take another look at it and see if we want to reword it or reinvestigate, that I would not object to that.
Okay, Amy, thoughts?
Yeah, I think as planners, we do need to keep it on our radar, because when we went through the master plan, the majority of the comments and concerns were high density duplexes. And so although I think it's slowed down with COVID or building, but I definitely think it needs to stay on our radar, because if it did all of a sudden, I got nervous when I heard Michelle said it's going to go up and out. Like, I think that's what people moved here because they love the small town community, and they moved away from the towns in the east because they said of the traffic and the schools got crowded, and I know we're near build out, and I know people love the small town community feel. So if things started going up and out and it became an urban town, I think a lot of people would be upset. So I think as planners, we'll keep our eye on the pulse of what's happening in town.
Yeah.
And then just keep an eye on it and see what happens.
Okay.
I just wanted to, if I could just clarify, what I wanted to say was, in the neighborhoods like a Pine Haven or whatever, if they bought their house for $250 and now they have all this equity built in it and they can't afford a colonial and they want to get beyond a ranch, that's what I mean, but they're going to go up and out. They're going to build up and they're going to build out as long as they meet what Bob was talking about within the guidelines.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I thought you meant like duplexes and high density zoning. And
no, I think you're going to see the neighborhood significantly change because all of this equity is being built up and people are going to want to build in their houses. They're going to want to stay in the town, but they can't afford a $900,000 colonial.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, so it sounds like we're okay tabling with it. I'm sorry, we're okay tabling it. It does sound like a bigger discussion and some different components of it to think about. So we will table that one. Amy, that leaves you back to non-conforming and contractor's yard.
Yep. And they kind of, when I'm thinking about it and when I was listening to the last minutes, on video when we talked about contractors yard last time. They kind of go hand in hand. I guess my concern, and I'm not trying to say anything bad about Bob or anybody in staff, my concern was when I heard the minutes last week or 2 weeks ago, when they said, the guy who sells cabinet on Main Street, he's a contractor's yard. And I guess if contractors' yards end up being the definition for everything in the downtown, okay, that person who I would picture as retail sales because he's selling cabinets, all of a sudden is a contractor's yard. He leaves, and next thing you know, we have a landscaping company with mulch and trucks there. I guess that's one of my concerns. And
Amy.
yep.
I'm sorry, I actually did talk to the guy who owns that building, and
Yep.
he is retail. He's not a contractor.
Yeah, that's what I would have thought. And
So-
even when
yeah.
the new granite company came in, the interpretation sheet said retail because he's selling the granite slabs. So, I mean, I guess it's late tonight, and I still do want to go forward with them, but it's 10 of 10. So I don't know if anyone's okay with talking about it next time. And plus, maybe, I don't know if the ZBA is going to be here next time, or I know that was discussed, or if we're just going to meet again.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
So I totally understand how you have concerns about like the 1970s and 80s type of contractors yards that might still exist along Main Street where you're thinking about. So my concern is I feel like contractor's yard is so general that maybe we need to do a little modernization, because I'm thinking more of you're looking at the trades in general. So its scope is so broad that I
Right,
almost
yeah.
think like I go back to when we talked as a board about, the changes that are evolving in industrial. Do you want to have various levels of industrial, right? So you have levels that are not, they're not as intrusive to the neighborhood, so they go near the neighborhoods, and then, you tier it that way. Is it that what you want to look like? I think when you modernize contractor's yard or a contractor shop, is I get it, like something that's very intrusive to a neighborhood, you wouldn't want in like a business district. But then a small contractor shop, like a little, like we talked about, maybe, a granite place or something that does, you were talking about like a cabinetry place that is, Bob is the person who has to make the definitions, has to make the determinations on these definitions. If they're all lumped together with this one word called contractor, which to me
Right.
in modern terms could also mean a contractor could be anything, right? And then
Right.
you've got yard to me means exterior and shop to me means interior. I think what the board needs to work on, maybe making a determination on those definitions, and then do you want to level it, and then where do you want it?
Yeah.
Right.
So I agree with you that, I mean, you have some concerns which seem valid. I just think we need to break it down so we don't have these unintended consequences for some small business owners in town.
Right. I agree. And I think with the email I sent out on contractor's yard, it is the definition I was trying to work on, and we could all work on it together. And maybe it ends up 2 definitions come out of it because it is vague, and we, like you said, it could be a service person or it could be a shop, but I think maybe if everybody looks at that and has ideas, we can discuss it next time. I mean, it's 10 of 10.
Okay, so that, I think, is that worth talking about again? Yep,
Yes.
okay, I agree. All right, and non-conforming?
I think the same thing. I'd like to talk about it next time. I mean, we just took the non-conforming class, so I had some ideas, and I might even have a question for town council. But, I think it's a lot to get into right now at 10 to 10.
Mhm.
Okay, so in terms of the ZBA, I did watch their last meeting, and I see that I think it was Paul had asked about possibly having a joint meeting, and it seemed that the ZBA liked that idea as well. So Would we want to, I think we need the next meeting. We have Steris at a hearing with Steris to start. I don't know how much that might actually be continued, but I think we need time to get in a better spot before we sit down with other groups. So what if we use the next meeting to kind of hammer through these final things, and then the second meeting in January, maybe that first hour of our of our meeting, invite the ZBA to join us. Does that sound like something that would make sense to do?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yep.
Kathy, I didn't hear them mention a date. Maybe they did say a date. I didn't catch it if they did, but is that something that you could just mention, or they don't meet again until after that meeting? So I don't know the best way to coordinate.
Yeah, I mean, I can, I'm just looking at the calendar. So you're looking at the 19th, asking them if they want to meet with you on the 19th. So, I mean, I can certainly, just send an email to the ZBA tomorrow, just so that we can, I mean, I can't believe, I'm already scheduling into March and April. But,
So what if we did?
but I mean, just to get it on their calendars,
Would we want to do like Michelle, is 6 o'clock too early for you if we did 6 to 7?
No, I'm good. I'm good
And then,
with
so if
that.
we did 6 to 7 and then kick into our regular meeting at 7. So if they can join us for that first hour.
Kathy,
One of the things that Fred, I'm sorry, Amy, that Fred was just suggesting, they were in the same room. So this is we're holding it offline, sorry. But one of the things that Fred just suggested, although I'm not sure what the hearing schedule is for the 26th, is that, we do a joint meeting on the 26th if the ZBA didn't have a lot on their plate that night. And I think, Bob, I think we've gotten 2 or 3 hearings. So, applications so far.
I'm pretty sure you're gonna see at least 3, potentially 4.
Yeah. Okay.
And those are typically
that-
appeals.
Yeah, so that probably doesn't work then. We're kind of just thinking out loud here. So, I mean, if we did that, I can throw that out, that on the 19th, from, I think it's going to take longer than 6 to 7, but that we start at 6 and put the ZBA on, the zoning discussion with the ZBA on first.
Yeah, I think we're looking for maybe if they could receive a copy of what we have so far so that they have some thoughts. I mean, I would just be looking for some initial feedback or questions or things like that.
Mhm.
If they could do that, and if they have time in advance of that, and then we could kind of. It looks like there are ones that primarily impact them, so maybe we focus on those. And of course, any feedback for any of them really is welcome, but just the ones that impact them specifically, we'd obviously want to cover.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's-
I'll do that tomorrow. I'll send that out tomorrow.
well, what I was thinking along the same lines that we should send out the information in advance, but we should wait on the bylaw information until after the 5th, because we're still going to talk about.
Good point.
Well, I mean, I can at least, notify them and let them know of the date. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's late. I want to wrap us up. Do we need anything else covered in this meeting that cannot wait? A&Rs, bonds?
No, I didn't have anything else for you.
We never went back to the 10-20 minutes, but I think it's too late for that.
Oh, yeah,
no.
that's.
Kathy just vetoed that, I think.
I'm saying the same thing.
She sounds
Okay.
so disappointed. Oh,
I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
second.
Okay, all in favor, Amy? Oh, yeah, Amy,
Hi, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays.
Millie,
See ya.
Michelle?
Michelle?
Oh,
Aye. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
Yeah.
Anthony,
Aye.
and Carrie's an aye. Merry Christmas and happy holidays to everyone.
Okay, good night,
Two.
everyone.
Hey,
Bye.
hey.